Oh shit. Ba, 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 ba. Let's see. Wait. Come on. Don't be weird. And then we go to... Man, the fucking Minecraft music. Yes. Bow. Let's see, and let's see what it will. Okay, so it's P1. Oh, well, the first clip we can say, or I can say. So P1, our F1 driver ratings for the 2024 Saudi Arabia Grand Prix watching stuff will be happening first. Then the race about Ferrari and maybe the rules. Maybe then after that Kim Illman. And if I care, it will be the 1 hour long podcast thingy the races have done. So yeah, let's see, and well, it's just, and see, I will be, let's see, we can fix, yes. Let's see. Oh yeah, just continue to mine out this area. Let's see. I think it's okay. So is this wall? So this will need to get some fackles. Where did I get that from? Torches. Torch on this wall. Well, and then just mining out like I've been doing the past. I mean, I started since Formula 1 started, or maybe before it started. I've been mining out, so what I would say, after I mine out this, I will, I mean, it's one corner left to do, but that can wait. And we will probably like I've done over there, I will probably fix that corner so it looks similar. But yeah, so that's what I would be doing. Mining and placing torches. Maybe hearing some Bosch opinion from Formula 1 YouTube creators. So let's start.
Our Saudi Arabian Grand Prix F1 driver ratings. This video is sponsored by the wonderful people over at Squarespace, the all-in-one website platform for entrepreneurs to stand out and succeed online. Okay, let's get into driver ratings then, shall we? And begin with Kevin Magnussen.
I mean, they like this, what they did. Oh man. It is nice when you do it when you yourself get points, but not when you ruin the race for others. When you will never win on it.
Absolute chef. He qualified 13th and finished 12th. I am going to lock in for K-Mag, the defensive train conductor, a 7 out of 10. I can't give him any higher than a 7 because the bloke was absolutely on it with penalties. And I feel as though that you have to take that into account. He obviously did a great job for Nico Hulkenberg, got Haas a point. But the only reason he did was because he shoved Albon in the wall, got him some front wing damage, and then overtook Tsunoda off the track, and then decided to slow down the rest of the cars behind him, which was, you know, Minister of Defence stuff.
If you yourself get points, but you didn't. So it's just ruined the race for everyone else. Man, what a fun race.
But you can't ignore the fact that he was breaking rules.
Yeah, I mean, being happy with someone breaking rules because they get points. I mean, so what's your opinion?
In order to make this happen.
I have gone for Kevin Magnussen a 5 out of 10. This one is a controversial one to essentially kick things off because essentially he's done a fantastic team job, but like you say, it's based on his erratic driving. His move on Albon was ridiculous. His move on Tsunoda was illegal. And
yeah, and this you're happy for.
You can argue that he might have even got points himself if he didn't drive so badly. He's a really difficult driver to rate because he did what he did for the team, but only because he was a bit useless. Well, 24% of people gave him an 8 out of 10. But then
so that's the fan vote. 8 out of 10 for K-Mag.
Yeah, 8% 5, 9% 6. So people were very generous to K.
Man. Okay, interesting. They think that was good because the only thing they like to watch. So I mean, nothing happened. How can that be interesting and being... I mean, what do the British fans say about when Sarah Perez did it to Hamilton?
K-Mag.
2021.
12%.
You thought you were onto something there. You loaded that up expecting a bigger number for a 4 out of 10.
Basically, the fans are wrong. Why do we even do this?
Oh, Tommy, don't say that.
Because 12%
the
of people
fans are wrong.
will have given him 10 out of 10.
Wow, Tommy's starting off this driver rating with an absolute sucker punch to not just K-Mag, but everybody that watches and listens as well. Unbelievable scenes. Let's go to his teammate now then, Nico Hulkenberg. He qualified 15th and finished 10th.
Gone for an 8 out of 10 for Nico Hulkenberg because, unlike his teammate, he actually drove a good race. He was very unfortunate, I think, not to make it through.
Well, good race. Alex Albon and Yuki Tsunoda could have also done a good drive. But someone ruined it. And who was that? The one that people are praising like a fucking retard.
Maybe even to Q3, they had that problem and made it work. Yes, thanks to Kevin Magnussen, but
made it work. Yeah, I wonder why, how he succeeded to make it work.
To grade Magnussen. The more I say it, I'm more like, no, maybe he should get more. But I'm like, no, he shouldn't. No, I think he should get
that with your chest, Tommy.
Yeah,
you can't get it back now. For Nico Hulkenberg, I am actually going to give him a 9 out of 10. I'm going to try this year, when possible, to give slower car drivers an actual good grade. At the end of the day, Nico Hulkenberg has entered the top 5 team category, obviously with Stroll's mistake, but still he has scored a point, which we have already said many times was very, very difficult to do. And also, you know, he was really unlucky in qualifying, where he had a problem with the fuel system, and then just drove a really solid race. And you know, I look at that and I go, how much more could he have done? And the fans have given him an 8. Let's quickly chat about our sponsor for this video, Squarespace.
Okay, this we skip. Man.
Or domain using the code P1. Zhou Guanyu now, qualified 20th, finished 18th. I've gone for a 4 out of 10 for Zhou Guanyu. Not the best of weekends by any stretch. Of course, he crashed in final practice, which then meant he couldn't set a time in qualifying. He missed the flag by only a few seconds, and then just had a very, very just uneventful race.
I've gone for a 3 out of 10 for Zhou Guanyu. When on these kind of circuits, it's the the risk you run for having a big crash in FP3. So I have to grade it harshly that essentially he's binned it in the wall, given his mechanics a huge job, and it's basically cost his whole weekend from there on, really.
The fans gave Zhou Guanyu a 5 out of 10. Intriguing.
Kevin Magnussen should have also got 5. Man, so fucking
I'll go to
bad.
his teammate, Valtteri Bottas, qualified 16th.
I mean, shouldn't we give Bottas 2021 really good points, because he got rid of Max Verstappen and Perez in the first turn. That must be really good. I mean, Lewis Hamilton could secure an easy win. 10 of 10.
Finished 17th.
Retard thinking.
I have gone for a 4 out of 10 for Valtteri Bottas. A mediocre race, not much.
I mean, thanks for the overspending by Red Bull. They're the greatest car now, maybe. We must celebrate.
To shout about. You think with Bottas that maybe you could pull something out of the bag. We saw, like I say, Zhou getting points in Bahrain. It doesn't seem like the Kick Sauber is miles off the others. I still don't think it's a great car, but I'm sure Bottas, with his experience, could have delivered something a bit better than 17th, so I've given him a 4.
I am going to go for 5 out of 10 for Valtteri Bottas, just purely because I think this...
No!
Välkommen till
Oh, we can
Bettingia.
skip it.
Just nu
Hi.
bjuder vi på 100 kronor i vett.
The
This car
car.
is absolutely horrendous, and I can't give him the same grade as Zhou Guanyu, considering the mistakes that were in his weekend. So yeah, I'm going to go for a 5 for Bottas, and the fans gave Bottas a 4.
He got a 5 and a 4, but Kevin Magnussen get... Oh, yeah, sure.
Yuki Tsunoda now.
Okay,
Qualified-
but for real, Bottas. He and Ricciardo was last, so okay, sure.
9th, finished 14th. I'm going to give Yuki Tsunoda a 6 out of 10. Obviously had a great qualifying, managed to get to Q3, which is no mean feat.
Much better than Kevin Magnussen, fuck him.
Was 5 places ahead of Danny Rick, completely smoked him in that. What could have been, I think, once again for Yuki, but
Man, the greatest point scorer ever could have been. But then Kevin Magnussen, you should just ruin it.
still showed signs of pace, signs of promise. That's why I can't give him straight down the middle, so that's why it's a little bit higher than that.
It pains me to say that I've gone for a 5 out of 10 for Yuki Tsunoda. I think it could have been another points finish, particularly with someone
You
like
should
you know,
have.
Nico Hülkenberg and Haas scoring a point. So there were points up for grabs. And it was disappointing that he kind of got outsmarted in a lot of the racing. For example, you know, he was battling with K-Mag for so long and couldn't get past him, and then his move ended up costing him a place to Ocon, and then he got stuck in the DRS train. And I do think that points were up for grabs if maybe he'd managed to get past K-Mag and hold that position.
Yuki Tsunoda, the fans gave him a 6 out of 10. Daniel Ricciardo now qualified 14th.
This is a 4
16th.
or a 5.
I've gone for 2 out of 10 for Daniel Ricciardo. It's painful, but I think he had an absolutely awful race. I thought these days...
I mean, the spin in the end, that was like, man, really?
we saw at McLaren were over, but this, like I said in the race review podcast, looked exactly like the days of McLaren. You know, to be almost half a second off Yuki Tsunoda in qualifying is not great. Spun on his own, very bizarre. Looked just completely really bad weekend for him. And I notice a lot of people trying to justify his race by saying he had a really slow pit stop, like a 40-second pit stop. But he had that pit stop during a safety car period, which meant that he was on the back of the pack for the safety car restart. So he didn't lose 40 seconds. He obviously lost like a place or something.
I've gone for a 3 out of 10 for Daniel Ricciardo. I guess that 40-second pit stop, everyone's focusing on that part, but as you say, he was running towards the back anyway. Not great pace, obviously spun at turn 1, which I love how the commentators tried to be like, was there contact? Did someone hit him? No, he had contact with the curb too hard and spun. Yeah, it was a concerning weekend for Daniel Ricciardo and everyone that loves him. A really disappointing weekend for Danny Ric, and one that he cannot do too many more of these, otherwise we are going to be questioning what happens to him and his seat.
I mean, I think I really don't care so much, because then Perez will keep his seat. That's just a win-win.
The fans gave him a 3 out of 10.
A win-win.
Well. Logan Sargent now, qualified 19th, finished 15th. I am going...
5
to give Logan Sargent a 4 out of 10. Just a disappointing race for Logan. I genuinely thought that maybe, just maybe... Well, I didn't. I kind of
I was going to say you made him biggest.
I would say I believe that. Let's see. He's most likely will not keep the seat. I mean, people say progress, but I don't feel like it's good enough progress. I mean, if we then look at Oliver Bearman and what he succeeded.
In the race, he was there. He was in the mix. He had K-Mag holding up the whole train. Maybe he can get involved and get stuck in. But Albon destroyed him again with damage. That's just not good enough. Starting 19th, 7 places behind your teammate is one thing, but then not being able to translate it really into the race as well. Logan, he's starting this season exactly how he finished last season.
Yeah, I've gone for a 4 out of 10 for Logan as well. Completely echo everything you say. It doesn't seem like he's improved at all going into this season, at least from the start of it, which is a big shame to see, because you thought with the backing of James Vowles and a bit of a reset over the winter that he'd be able to just sort of get his head back in the game and be fine. But yeah, he shouldn't be getting so comprehensively beaten by Alex Albon.
The fans gave Logan Sargent a 4 out of 10. Alex Albon now, qualified 12th.
6 or 7.
Finished 11th.
Gone for a 7 out of 10 for Alex Albon. 11th is actually a pretty decent finishing position when, again, there's not the top teams have kind of locked out a lot of those positions. It's a difficult one to grade because, yeah, Logan's not having a great...
No, it could have been a Vita Cash-Up or be Formula 1 team first point or Williams first point in this season. But no. Ken Magnusson made so Haas
start to the season,
so fucking lame.
and he was kind of caught in that pack. Nothing huge to shout out about, but it's a solid result again, and exactly what someone like Logan should be doing as well, but he's not.
A little bit of sideways slander to Logan again, as we were talking about Alex. Fair enough. I've also gone for a 7 out of 10 for Alex Albon. I think that it was a decent enough drive. It was a shame that he got stuck in that pack, and I think he definitely actually said
wait, it was shame. So are you supporting or are you against what Kevin Magnusson did? Because you apparently didn't like the outcome of what Kevin Magnusson did.
He was wishing that he had a bit more top straight line speed to get past the Haas and obviously that train. But to still finish 11th is a decent drive, and to do that with damage as well after being squeezed into the wall is...
By who? Oh, the one that scored 8 or 10? Yeah.
Is great. Yeah, unlucky for Alex, but still a decent enough drive.
Unlucky? Yeah, he is unlucky that FIA lets Kevin Magnusson still, or Haas, still keep in the car. I agree, that's really unlucky.
The fans gave him a 7 out of 10 as well. Esteban Ocon qualified
I mean, I was just 6-6.
17th, finished 13th. I've gone for a 6 out of 10 for Ocon. I think that it was a better outing for Ocon to actually be in that pack. Where he would have been had Magnussen not been slowing down, who knows, but he was obviously stuck right in there trying to get past the Haas for quite some time. But it wasn't an absolute disaster showing from Alpine this time. They're nowhere near the top 5 teams, that's clear to see, but at least they're not languishing at the back in 17th and 18th. Ocon was getting involved, stuck in there, gained some positions in the race, and so yeah, that's why I've gone for a 6.
I've gone for a 7 out of 10 for Esteban Ocon. 13th in my opinion, the worst car in the field is actually quite good.
Fair enough, yeah. The fans gave Ocon a 5.
Wait, did I say 6?
Pierre Gasly.
I mean, 0 or 1 maybe.
He qualified 18th and then did not finish. Retired with a gearbox problem on lap 1.
I've gone for a 5 out of 10 for Pierre Gasly. He's a very difficult driver to rate, of course, because...
Now, talk me through his race, Tommy. Come on.
Okay, well, lap 1, wow, incredible. The way he radioed his team to say that his car had broken down already was superb.
Beautifully communicated.
Great communication, yeah. But Alpine, awful, useless, many other bad words. What more can go wrong for Alpine?
We will have to wait and see.
Find out.
Yes, I've gone for a 5 out of 10 as well for Gasly. As you say, 4 thousandths of a second separating Ocon and Gasly in qualifying. Just shows just how closely matched those two are, but they are both in dustbins at the moment, and fingers crossed for their sake and for Alpine's sake they can figure out why that is. Very hard to rate, so straight down the middle for Gasly with a 5, and the fans also gave him a 5 out of 10.
Okay,
Lance
sure.
Stroll now qualified 10th and then did not finish because he crashed on lap 5. I am going to lock in a 2 out of 10 for Lance Stroll. It's a mistake that's easily done, but it's a mistake all the same. Binned it into the wall. You know, he made Q3, which was a tiny, like, woo for Lance, but obviously he was 6 places behind his teammate. Come on, son. You've got to be doing better than that, my friend. Otherwise, your seat's going to be under... oh, wait. 2 out of 10.
Yes, for Lance Stroll, I've gone for a 1 out of 10. I really don't want to slander him, but he makes it extremely difficult.
Why not? Why don't you want to slander him? I mean, when he's normal, or everything is normal, nothing happens. And then one day he maybe are good. But you don't want someone that just good one time per week. You want someone that are good at least more than 1 week.
Difficult with this because last race we were singing his praises. This is exactly what he needs to do, and then he is absolutely nowhere near Alonso in qualifying, which is bad even for him to be that far off. I mean, Behrman wasn't that far off Charles Leclerc. It might be.
I mean, the difference between Stroll and Behrman, you must recognize that.
0, but maybe he just gets a 1 for his amusing team radio.
A sympathy point for that team radio, which was absolutely world class. The fans also gave Lance Stroll a 2 out of 10, so they're on my side. They're being a bit more lenient than Tom Bellingham. Fernando Alonso now qualified 4th, finished 5th.
I have gone for a 9 out of 10 for Fernando Alonso.
Shock.
Yeah, shock. Who would have thought? Just got everything he possibly could out of that car. Don't think it's one of the the top cars. Well, it is one of the top cars, but not the top of the top. So to deliver 4th in qualifying, almost getting on the front row, and then finishing an impressive 5th, I think is a very good job from Fernando, and just more like what he did last year, just getting everything he possibly can out of a car.
Yeah, I banter about you loving Fernando, but it was a 9 out of 10 performance because that's what I've also gone.
Yeah. 9. Where did he start? Let's see. Saudi Arabia. qualifying? He's qualified 4th. And a 5th. Yeah, I can agree with 9.
On for. I think that the Aston Martin probably isn't as quick as that, and for Alonso to have kept Russell at bay for pretty much the entire race was a great effort as well. The fans gave Fernando an 8 out of 10. Oscar Piastri now.
Oh, 10.
Qualified 5th, finished 4th. I've gone for a 9 out of 10 for Oscar
Why?
Piastri. I think that it was an excellent race from him. He is so tenacious and aggressive on the first lap as well. I love seeing Oscar Piastri on the first lap. He's like, tyre wear? No. Getting the tyres into a window? No. I'm just going to send it. And he's just so aggressive. And I love to see that from Oscar. And just generally, he had a great race. Of course, he got stuck behind Hamilton. But my God, that McLaren is like, it has a parachute out the back of its car down the straight line. In a straight line, sorry.
I've also gone for a 9 out of 10 for Oscar Piastri. I think it's a big statement so early in the season to outqualify Lando Norris, and his race pace has improved quite a lot as well. Oscar did a fantastic job, and yeah, he's had a very, very good start to the season indeed. Well done.
The fans gave Oscar an 8 out of 10.
8. Why?
Yeah, savage. Lando Norris now qualified 6th, finished 8th.
Man,
I've gone
what's
for
the
a
opinion?
7 out of 10 for Lando.
Wait, Lando Norris. Oh yeah, the race didn't end very good. Sure, 7.
Norris. He was obviously very close to Oscar in qualifying. Still don't really understand how on earth he managed to escape a jump start penalty. Lucky there, because it could have been worse. And of course, you know, he did.
Or maybe not. They could maybe have saved his race.
A
Even
completely different strategy that didn't work out. I expected more from Lando.
I've also gone for a 7 out of 10 for Lando. I think that the FIA did clear it up and essentially said that because of there was no it's basically what we thought. There was no notification from the transponder that there was movement or enough movement in the grid box, which, I mean, you can just use your literal eyes to see that. But no, Lando, it's difficult to judge his race or his
Rules are rules. Shouldn't they follow them? I mean, Kevin Magnussen didn't. So why do you care about the rules now?
pace.
Varmt välkomna till premiären utav Svenska Spels nya talkshow Veckans Agenda.
Oh my god, så lång är.
Våran hedersgäst Dick Axelsson, vad gör dig glad?
Ingenting. Stämmer det att Niklas Wikegård kallade dig för mjukost?
More or less done, so now we can stop mining.
Because of the fact he was put on a very strange strategy, and it was one of those strategies that was a hopeful one rather than anything else. And yeah, the gamble didn't pay off. So 7 out of 10 from me, and the fans also gave Lando a 7 out of 10. Ollie Bearman.
8, 9 or 10.
Qualified 11th, finished 7th. It is a 10 out of 10, and I love social media. I also despise it in equal measure. But some people saying, "Oh, stop hyping Ollie Bearman up. Liam Lawson did this, or blah 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 did this," and it's like, okay, fine. They are separate examples that were commended, and Ollie Bearman should be commended for a 1-hour practice and to go and do what he then did around this track, which I've said so many times is a very difficult track and very easy to make a mistake. Lance Stroll showed that, who is a veteran.
Yeah, the veteran Lance Stroll, the world champion soon.
Of the sport these days. He's been around long enough, and he's broken his front left steering arm. Ollie Bearman did not do that, and especially at the end of the race, he showed.
What does that say about Lance Stroll if Ollie Bearman didn't do that? Or Sargent, or Zhou Guanyu.
Unbelievable tenacity to just lock down and not be phased by what was
Stroll
behind.
and Lewis is so
It's
washed.
a great performance, if not fantastic performance from Ollie Bearman. and I will not hear anything other than a 10 out of 10 for his performance.
Well then. No, I've gone for a 10 out of 10. Don't worry.
Good. Well, it was P1 with Matt.
You can't just say it's a Ferrari. He had so much up against him. He's never...
Oh. Don't you understand what they mean when they mean where he finished? It's thanks to the Ferrari. That he finished is thanks to him. I mean, come on. Do you not recognize the difference?
Had that race simulation, he was talking about how difficult it was to follow other cars, and that was something he was experiencing for the first time in a race. By a few laps, of course he's got a big car advantage, but he's never driven it before in a race, and he had to make moves, you know, on Tsunoda and Hülkenberg and these drivers that he's not raced in Formula 1 before. He's not done any running, so yeah, it was thrown up against him, and he delivered. It was a great performance. Really, really good.
The fans gave Ollie Behrman a 10 out of 10 as well. Charles Leclerc, he qualified
second, finished third. I mean, I would say 10.
second, finished third.
I've gone for a 9 out of 10.
9?
Good
Why?
podium. Was never going to beat the Red Bulls, but he
He would never beat the Red Bull, but he's washed or what?
did what he needed to do, and what more can you say, really? He is
So 10.
in a good car. It looks like Ferrari are the second quickest car,
So
and he's
10.
delivered where it should be. A bit
So
of a
10.
quiet race, really, but a good performance.
So 10.
Yeah, I've gone for a 9 out of 10 as well for Charles Leclerc. I think he even said it was a boring race because he couldn't really do much. Yeah, a P3 is the absolute pretty much maximum he could have done there.
So fucking 10.
They're still lacking some pace in the race for sure. Oh dear.
Is that
When
thanks to the Ferrari, thanks to Leclerc? So because of that, not a 10? Man, so
gonna
washed.
change? Who knows? But yes, a 9 out of 10. And the fans also gave
I mean, you gave Oliver Behrman a 10, so why not Leclerc 10?
Charles
also?
Leclerc a 9 as well. We now go to George Russell. He
sure.
qualified 7th and finished 6th.
8.
I have gone for a... Oh! 7. No! 8. No! God, it's right in the middle. 7 out of 10 for George Russell. I don't think it was anything special this weekend, but he beat his teammate, qualified ahead of him, scored some decent points.
He beat a 7-time world champion. Remember to say that when someone beats him.
I don't think we really saw much of George Russell at all, really, in this race. And for a team that is so high up the grid, you don't tend to see that all too much. But yeah, George had a reasonably quiet race, but a decent showing.
Yeah, I've also gone for a 7 out of 10. Did a good job, if not spectacular, but then the Mercedes doesn't seem particularly great at the moment.
If not spectacular, are you saying that he might well have done a spectacular performance, or are you saying not spectacular?
It was not spectacular.
Yeah, you said if not spectacular. I was like, wait, you should be giving it a 10 then, bro.
No, it was not spectacular.
The fans gave George Russell a 7 out of 10. Lewis Hamilton now qualified 8th and finished 9th.
Oh my god. 4 or 3.
Gone for a 6 out of 10 for
6? Why?
Lewis Hamilton. Argue it might even be a low 6. He didn't have a good weekend at all. Didn't look particularly
Nothing
quick.
was good with
George
him.
beat him in all the sessions as well, you know, qualifying as well. And yeah, he was on that bad suicidal strategy that we mentioned that Lando was on. But I think even if it was a normal run, he wouldn't have beaten George anyway, based on the weekend he had. It was a bit of a messy weekend from him.
Certainly was. I've gone for a 6 out of 10 as well for Lewis Hamilton.
Why? At least 4. Come on. What's the opinion?
Yeah, it was not the right strategy. Obviously, in hindsight, it was right with Lando and fighting there, and you could see just how much they were losing in that first sector. Obviously, some of that's down to setup and where McLaren was good, but
So
my
what's the
goodness me, they
team?
were losing like almost a
Sixth
second
for
at times
Hamilton.
to Norris, and then Hamilton, typically coming over the radio and saying, "Wow, that McLaren is impressive in the high speeds and all that sort of stuff." And the fans have gone for a 6 out of 10 as well.
Why?
Sergio Perez qualified third,
9.
finished second. I've gone for a 9 out of 10 for Sergio Perez this week. I think that it was a very solid performance from Perez, just like he did last year at this stage as well. And I'm hoping that it continues for Perez's sake. He's not quite on Max's level, but we all kind of know that, really. And I think Perez himself knows that. And I wonder if that actually will help him.
I mean, I would say probably he learned after last season that, man, he's really good. Maybe I will hopefully win something more, but or he could just be happy to see that if he succeeds to win one more time or more than that, I mean that can make him feel really happy that he succeeded to win against Max Verstappen again.
If he begins to kind of understand that he doesn't need to push as hard to try and beat Max Verstappen, because Max is in an absolute league of his own at the moment.
I've also gone for a 9 out of 10. He's had a great start to the season, everything that he needs to do, and yeah, can't say much more than that. It's a good drive. He's not going to be worried in the slightest about people taking his seat based on the ones that are rumoured to be taking it and how they're driving at the moment. So yeah, he's doing
And some people even think Max will leave, so then we will make him will. That makes so he can stay even easier.
a good job.
Absolutely.
And a lot
fans-
closer to Max, actually, sorry, as well.
Yeah, closer than Bahrain
Yeah,
for sure.
it's not like that
So,
20-second gap. But, minus the penalty, it was only, 8 or something, I think?
8 or
Something
9,
like
yeah. A decent performance from him. The fans gave him a 9 out of 10. And finally, Max Verstappen. Qualified first. Finished first.
It's another 10 out of 10. Dominant qualifying.
It's a 1.
Some of the screenshots from his qualifying lap are insane. I think it's probably gone a bit under the radar because you kind of expect him to get pole now, whereas that one in 2021, because it was such a close fight, it looked more spectacular. But when you watch his onboard, you wouldn't know that he'd been up till 4 a.m. playing iRacing the previous day. So just a comfortable victory, never looked in doubt, didn't get the fastest lap, clearly needs to do
Should
a
be
bit
a
more
7
iRacing.
then, really.
Yeah, should have gone to
They would have made Leclerc easily get on 10 also, right? No.
bed at 2
okay.
a.m. instead. When you actually just think about it, that he's won 19 of the last 20 races. I think you said it
That show how washed Hamilton was.
on the Twitch stream that we are
Super
arguably
washed.
witnessing the greatest prime of a driver that we've ever seen, and it's hard to disagree because he's just unstoppable.
This is the thing, right? And people would argue, yeah, but Verstappen's up against Perez, and Perez isn't that great, or whatever. But if you actually look at the delta times between, this particular season and the last few with Max Verstappen obviously winning, and the advantage that Red Bull have over one lap and in the race, compare that to the Mercedes domination era, compare that to the Ferrari domination era, which was a long time ago. But they had bigger margins, and yet these records are being broken by Max Verstappen, who, it's not easy in qualifying. As you say, you see the screenshots. He is pushing to the absolute ragged edge within a couple of centimetres of the wall. And it's just absolutely
But I would say I've not seen his quali lap. Maybe I should.
mind-boggling that he is able to produce such metronomic consistency every single week. And I genuinely, look, people joke about iRacing, he's on till 4 a.m, never stops thinking about it. But that, I genuinely think there is a part to play with the fact that he lives and breathes motorsport. He never switches off from it. And
Well, he does. But when he have enough free time, he will probably never switch off.
yes, as you may well think, I'm going to say, a 10 out of 10 is coming from me as well for Max Verstappen. The fans also gave
I
Max
mean,
Verstappen...
if you've seen clips on his live stream, even then he have someone that always ruined the what can you say? The gaming.
Verstappen, a 10 out of 10, no surprise there. Finally, we have to decide who is our P1. And you know what? This week, I'm giving it to Max Verstappen because we've just absolutely commended him to high heavens, and I can't then go and give it to Ollie Behrman, as much as it was an incredible performance from him as well. Max Verstappen is getting my P1 this week.
I will give it to Behrman. Just to be
Yeah, I thought you would. Just to be of course, you know, Behrman does deserve it as well. Cool. That pretty much wraps it up for the...
Wait, I want to see Leclerc. Oscar Piastri above them? Really? At least Sergio Perez or Charles Leclerc, you know, both of them should push down. Man, Nico, no. A 7th, no. I mean, the points for Haas is just that sad. This is what you want from Formula 1. People that are cheating. And then praise because the other one is cheating for you. Yeah. Should we praise Alonso to get a win? And then we praise also that his teammate cheated the race for him. Should we praise that?
P1 this week.
I will give it.
Should we praise Perez if he crashed in Hamilton 2021 Abu Dhabi? I mean, the Mesa Max 1. Shouldn't we praise that?
To Behrman. Just to be
Yeah,
different.
I thought you would, just to be different. Of course, you know, Behrman does deserve it.
I mean, if that
Cool,
happened,
that
shouldn't we
pretty
praise
much
that?
wraps it up for
Isn't that
this
beautiful?
week's edition
Cheating
of
to
Driver
get
Ratings.
a win
Thank you,
or
everybody. Lots of love.
points or-
Be sure to join our Patreon if you
Other
want to
stuff.
have lots more exciting access to other podcasts that we do during the season and loads of other benefits. Discord, and you can get a one-on-one with... No, you don't get a one-on-one with Tommy. Sorry, that's only for OnlyFans. So, right. Thank you, everybody. Lots of love. Take care. Bye!
Bye.
Yeah, go away with this. Oh my god. I would say only the house stuff was washed from them. Man. Yeah. Hey, after that, at least it will maybe be some more fun stuff, like the race. Ferrari F1 headache is its new star has created. I don't know, what kind of headache have Oliver Behrman done? Probably nothing. But we need sound.
It wasn't absurd to think Ollie Behrman would race for Ferrari in F1 one day, but now he's done so several years ahead of schedule, which gives Ferrari an interesting headache. Few F1 debutants
Yeah, the headache, it must be a big problem.
if any, have been thrown into the deep end the way 18-year-old Behrman was for his shock stand-in appearance in Saudi Arabia. And as highly rated as Behrman is, his performance still exceeded all expectations after being called up just a few hours before final practice when Carlos Sainz went to hospital with appendicitis. Ferrari was already well aware of Behrman's potential, that's why he is its leading junior driver, but it's had no designs on giving him a full-time race seat until quite a way in the future. Ferrari was going to keep Sainz alongside Charles Leclerc for the next couple of seasons, then pulled off the blockbuster multi-year signing of Lewis Hamilton for 2025 instead. Whichever path Ferrari had taken, Behrman wasn't in the short-term picture. What Ferrari wanted was for Behrman to win Formula 2 this year, be placed in another F1 team to serve his apprenticeship for at least a couple of seasons, then get a call up to partner Leclerc once he had proven himself. But after Behrman performed damn close to an acceptable level for an established Ferrari driver in a superb debut in Jeddah, maybe that original plan's no longer appropriate.
Why not? Man, this washed takes from the race. Holy shit. I mean, if we go through actually think about it. So he will have Formula 2 this year if he wins. If he doesn't win, he can still be in Formula 2 and keep driving. And maybe, I mean, being a Y1 race when he could maybe scored a lot of points kind of ruined it for him. But hey, he could be so good that he actually succeeded. So that's 1 year. Next year, I mean, I don't think Kevin Magnussen will stay either. So Kevin Magnussen, Sagan, goodbye. But life is tough. If he gets a seat, okay, that's 1 more year. Then we're up in 2 years and 1 year in with Hamilton. And if he doing great job, he will stay in house. Then it's maybe 1 more year. So now is, let's see, it's 2024 now, 2025 Hamilton joins, 2026 he can maybe still be in there. So maybe 2027 or 2028 he can actually join Ferrari. Is that the biggest headache ever? I mean, as long as he has the house seat and know we will get to Ferrari, why shouldn't he be happy with that? I mean, Russell was happy with being Williams because he knew he would be Mercedes soon. So what is the headache?
With that in mind, we'll get into what's next for Behrman.
Let's see. Norris and Prost will probably still be in McLaren, so he will not get a seat there. Audi, if they join, they will have Carlos Sainz and whoever is in the second seat, hopefully Jürgen Joe. So that's one place he could maybe wanna leave to, get a better drive. Let's see, Mercedes, what will they be doing? I mean, they have Vasti, Mick Schumacher, and also Antonelli. So there, in that seat will nothing be. And if people believe rumors about even Max Verstappen leaving or whatever Max do, Red Bull will have, I don't know, either they put Ricciardo in the seat or they put Lawson in the seat. So no seat there. Then Aston Martin, that could be a seat if Stroll leaves or if Alonso feel like nah, he's done now. But will you actually go to Aston Martin when you can have a drive in Ferrari? Probably not. So Red Bull gone, Mercedes is gone, McLaren probably gone. So the only team, or the only 2 teams that he could join is Audi or Aston Martin. And why should he join them when he can then join Ferrari? So what's the opinion?
Later in the video. First, we need to understand what made this performance good enough to give Ferrari something to think about.
Go way out.
Behrman's performance was so good, F1's very best drivers basically stood up and applauded it. World champion Max Verstappen was already impressed after watching Behrman's very first run in the car in FP3, which only amounted to 3 push laps with a cool down in between. And qualifying 11th, missing out on a spot in the top 10 shootout by just half a tenth, earned rave reviews. Verstappen said he's done an incredible job, Fernando Alonso thought he did fantastically well, and Leclerc felt Behrman handled it perfectly. The plaudits kept coming after a great drive to finish 7th in the race, showing enough pace in the final part of the Grand Prix to hold off Lando Norris and Hamilton as they attempted to catch and pass on fresher, softer tyres. Hamilton was the first to congratulate Behrman when he got out of the car, called.
I mean, you're saying something like he parked his car and went to him. He parked his car next to him. Was it that really so hard for him to maybe go and praise him if he actually parked the car at the same time as him and then also go out the car at the same time and also be near him when he together when this and the race? So this is I mean, sure, he could have not praised him, but it's not he went his way for trying to praise him. He was just next to him, and he just, oh, good job. You didn't get past me or you didn't let Norris or me get near you, so we could pass you. I mean, if Max Verstappen had walked for some reason from where he was and to Oliver, that you could say really he went his way to go and praise him, because he should be talking because he won the race, but he's going to Oliver Bernal. So Hamilton being first or even going praising, I mean, come on. So what's the
Did a phenomenal job and labelled Behrman a really.
And you don't know what he's actually said, or you don't, or maybe Oliver Bernal don't know what he said. It could be a deal. Hamilton maybe said, "Hey, you're washed. Let's shake hands with it."
Bright
and
future star.
Okay.
To understand the best
thinks
part of
he's
Behrman's race,
washed.
you actually need to look beyond the
Oliver Bernal thinks himself is washed. I mean, they shook hands, right?
headline result. He wouldn't have beaten Norris and Hamilton without a clear pace improvement mid-race, which when compared with Leclerc looks like Behrman making a step change himself rather than just benefiting from a natural in-race pace progression. The longer the race went on, the closer Behrman got to Leclerc's pace, and that's clearer when you focus on the part of the race.
I mean, you learn the track more, what to do, what to not do. I mean, he should improve.
That both drivers ran in clear air. Once Behrman finally cleared Nico Hülkenberg's Haas, he averaged 1 minute 33.889 seconds across 11 laps with a fastest time of 1 minute 33.379 seconds. In the same phase, Leclerc's best was 8 tenths faster and his average pace was around 6 tenths quicker. But then Behrman punched in a much faster lap than he had managed previously, and with the exception on a small mistake on the next lap, his pace was much better and much closer to Leclerc's until the finish. Over the rest.
So, okay. I mean, okay, sure. Was it because Leclerc tried his hardest to be fast, or was it he waited for the fastest lap to have so much good tires as possible? And Oliver Bernal was fighting to keep Norris and Hamilton behind, so what do you mean?
Rest of the Grand Prix, his average lap time plummeted to 1 minute 32.766 seconds, an improvement of over a second and just over 2 tenths a lap slower than Leclerc's average in the same period, even with Leclerc's anomalously slow late lap discounted. They were facing different race circumstances, which probably played a part. Behrman was pushing hard with Norris and Hamilton in pursuit, while Leclerc was able to manage to the end more
Yeah, true. So why do you even act like, wow, Oliver Bernal faster than Leclerc? Hi.
comfortably in third. But Leclerc wasn't exactly coasting, and ultimately it would be
No,
surprising.
it wasn't coasting. And who thinks that?
If Leclerc
Did Leclerc say that? Oh, he was fighting 100% every lap. The car was almost gone, but he just managed to keep it alive.
wasn't a few tenths quicker than Behrman, all things considered. The main thing for Behrman is that he improved through the race at a very favourable rate compared to Leclerc. As the pace got quicker, so did Behrman. It's not like he was inherently struggling to replicate what the car was capable of. And irrespective of the Leclerc reference, without that step in performance, Behrman wouldn't have finished 7th. It helped stem the time lost to Norris and Hamilton while they were at their quickest, and meant he even managed to be quicker than them again right at the end of the Grand Prix. Yes, the Ferrari was the quicker car, but Behrman was effective with it, got better and better as the race progressed, and proactively influenced his race result.
And this, for some reason, should be a headache for Ferrari.
Behrman could have scored an even better result, which might sound unfairly critical, but it actually reflects how good he was, so stay with us. Behrman was slightly disappointed he didn't hook it up in a disrupted qualifying session, as he definitely had the pace to be in Q3. His final run in Q1 was compromised by Fernando Alonso
beating Lewis Hamilton.
Jumping ahead of him at the last corner, which Ferrari could perhaps have done a better job of assisting with. Then his first flying lap in Q2 was interrupted by a red flag for Hülkenberg's stopped Haas. The laps he did do had a recurring theme of Behrman just struggling on the entry to the track's two most blind and awkward corners and running slightly deep. That left him needing a second lap on his final set of softs to try to make Q3, and with the best already taken out of the tyres, a good improvement wasn't quite enough. Lapping just half a second shy of Leclerc and finishing 6 tenths from pace setter Verstappen in that segment was obviously still a very good result. But had he started in the top 10, it's perfectly conceivable that Behrman could have raced and beaten the likes of George Russell and Alonso, who didn't look any faster than him.
Lewis Hamilton, he will 100% have beaten, why not mention him?
In the second half of the Grand Prix. So you're looking at a debut that could absolutely have ended with a top 5 finish. And again, that isn't meant to diminish what he actually achieved, it's highlighting that the result actually slightly undersells how competitive Behrman really was. In terms of the race itself, Behrman couldn't have done much more.
I mean, you did that. You undersold him. You didn't mention Lewis Hamilton,
his
seven-time
starting position.
champion.
He'll have
being
learned a lot about
worse
how to do battle
than
in these
Oliver.
cars, both on the opening lap of the main start and in how it took him a few too many laps to clear some slower cars, which meant losing time and doing some damage to his tyres. Maybe without that he could have been nibbling at Russell by the end of the Grand Prix, but there's no guarantee he'd have been properly on the back of the Mercedes, let alone able to successfully pass it. Moreover, these are really micro details to pick up on for a debutant in these circumstances, and are easily outweighed by the evidence of outright speed and impressive racecraft, like the excellent switchback move he pulled on Yuki Tsunoda at the safety car restart. Taking everything from Behrman's debut into consideration, the only reasonable conclusion is that he's ready for F1 now, in terms of ability and mentality.
Oh, like Lawson.
He's only 18, but like with all highly rated drivers in proper junior programs, he's already well prepared, especially as he was given the responsibility of being a reserve driver for Ferrari and Haas. But also, the drivers that impress this much make it look easy because of how good they are. Behrman's raw ability and remaining potential is obvious, but from a mental point of view, his capacity to deal with things is extremely high. He has a fantastic approach in that he's wonderfully attacking and confident, but also shows very good judgment in not trying to do too much too soon. He showed that last year in his Haas FP1 outings, and that's what gave us confidence he was well equipped to deal with the circumstances faced in Jeddah. Haas team boss Ayo Komatsu, who was wowed by Behrman's 2023 appearances for his team, called his debut amazing and described him as something special. He's fast, he understands what's required of him, absorbs information to improve rapidly, and handles himself very well. And he has a sharp eye for small details, which is a trait of the truly great drivers. One example this weekend was when FP3 finished and he asked for a slightly higher engine mode than normal on what would have been the cooldown lap, to get just half a lap or so extra pushing on soft tyres before qualifying.
Axe Dark Temptation Body Spray.
My god, our time, go away! No!
Allt är möjligt med en oemotståndligt fräsch doft. Lukta oemotståndlig. The Axe Effect.
Du vet känslan när verken börjar.
Skip it!
First and foremost, Ferrari will be delighted with what it saw from Behrman up close in
Okay, they're delighted. Why should it be? Why should this be a headache?
his F1 debut, rather than immediately worry what it needs to do now with such an asset. That said, Ferrari does only have limited options for him, because this wasn't the original plan. What Ferrari had broadly outlined to Behrman was focus on F2, win that championship, pay your dues at a small F1 team, and see where you end up in a few years. For starters, there's an irony around the fact that Behrman had to withdraw from his F2 commitments in Jeddah, where he had scored pole position, to make his F1 debut. It means he's now last in a championship he started the year probably needing to win to guarantee he'd get to make his F1 debut. Obviously, the weekend turned into a much bigger step towards an eventual full-time F1 seat than breathing life into his F2 title challenge.
So maybe instead of winning the Formula 2, he just got a house seat for free.
Would have been. Having seen the job Behrman did firsthand, Leclerc claimed it's now just a matter of time before he's in F1 permanently. That is surely not in question, and the answer of when is no later than 2025. But the details beyond that are tricky. Plan A for Behrman looked like, and probably still is, a Haas race seat next season and also 2026. But it's in Ferrari's interest to not just get this guy a race seat, but also the best one possible, and plot a course to the works team sooner rather than later. Leclerc and Hamilton are locked in for the next couple of years at least, and this shouldn't be taken as a suggestion that Ferrari's wrong to block Behrmann's path to its team by bringing in Hamilton. As it stands, the Ferrari lineup for the next 2 years is immense. What Ferrari must do is reevaluate what's best for Behrmann's development and will retain him as a long-term option for the team. A couple of years at Haas fighting competitively in the midfield is probably okay, but a couple of years of 2023 level Haas is a waste. And what if the Hamilton-Leclerc lineup is excelling by 2026 and Ferrari wants to keep it going? As Mercedes found by sending Russell on loan to Williams for 3 years, that kind of move can quickly run out of value, although there's always something to be learned. Perhaps the more appropriate comparison to draw is Oscar Piastri's Alpine saga. McLaren stealing Piastri from under Alpine's nose is a warning of how a highly rated, hungry young driver with aggressive management can get impatient if they feel they...
There wasn't impatient. The contract was impatient. Or the people that couldn't make the contract was impatient and to not give him that. So, man, so what's your opinion?
They're just going to be parked somewhere without a proper
They are
path
the
to
news channel.
something bigger.
God damn it.
That doesn't have to be what Ferrari sending Behrmann on loan somewhere has to turn into. He should have a much clearer path to Ferrari and stronger faith from his parent team than Piastri had from Alpine. So maybe the timeline is still fine and a 2-year Haas apprenticeship still works. And
what do you mean? It's fine. You titled it. Ferrari's F1 headache is new star has created. You mean everything is fine, but it's still a headache?
the main thing is Behrmann will need to know there is a Ferrari seat at the end of it and that he won't just be spent waiting for a tomorrow that never comes. That's especially important for Ferrari to keep in mind, given he's just signalled his ability to so many more potential suitors. In the short term, we shouldn't rule out Behrmann racing in F1 again in 2024. If either Ferrari or Haas faces some driver unavailability, another call-up will be on the cards. But anything more than that will need something drastic to happen, like Haas deciding to ditch Kevin Magnussen mid-season, which as of right now looks unlikely, no matter how big a fan Komatsu is of Behrmann. Whatever happens, Behrmann should be comforted by knowing a full-time F1 graduation must now be a matter of when, not if. And should Ferrari fail to react appropriately to such a statement debut, Behrmann will not be short of interested alternatives.
Wow. This everything about Oliver Behrmann from Ferrari, man, that was, man, bad. Really bad. Oh, so bad. Okay, let's see what the what's the watch take on the
F1 has given it.
Oh shit. The 2024 F1 fixed already failing. Let's see what the watch opinion is.
F1 has given itself a problem that it has tried and failed to fix in 2024. Ed, fill everybody in. What are we talking about?
Yeah, it's the thorny question of time penalties for track limits violations, specifically when overtaking another car. Previously, it was 5 seconds, which was the minimum they gave, and that was pretty much always what they dished out. But now it's gone up to 10 seconds, but it still hasn't solved the problem. And it's just this endless cycle of talking about penalties that's been going on for years now.
Oh, I know, and I remember how solution. Like I've always thought, it should be for every lap after you're overtaking someone back in a wrong way, you will have plus 5 seconds for every lap you is still what do you say? They're still oh my god, what is the name? Or the word? I mean, you don't say it's still overtaking. I mean, he overtook. Man. Okay, 5 seconds for every lap. The person you overtook is still behind you. That's one way to solve crazy maybe. And this is also something. But to make sure Kevin Magnussen can't ruin the race for more people, it's have a limit. Let's see, 5, 10, 15, 20, 6 lap. After 6 lap, if you still you need go into the pit and take your penalty.
In Formula 1, and this latest change doesn't really cut it.
Why is that? I think penalties have become a ridiculous situation in F1 because it feels like we're trying to fine-tune them all the time to almost get to this point where the punishment is equal to the crime. That seems needless to me. Are we too concerned now with penalties almost being gentle, and then you get into this situation that we've got where the teams and the drivers can kind of decide actually a gentle penalty is worth taking here?
Yeah, I think you're right that it's a philosophical question in that sometimes people say penalties are too harsh, but really the object of any penalty should be to penalise and correct the violation, shouldn't it? So if you can overtake somebody and go off track in doing so, and you shouldn't be there, and then you can sit there for however many laps interfering with the race, that's the fundamental problem. And I think that's the thing, you can't...
Not for P1. The watch takes are 100% that this was good.
It's come up with a commensurate penalty for that does not remove the situation of you being in the way. That's the simple philosophical question, whether it's 5, 10, 20 seconds. If the car is still there, it's in a place it shouldn't be.
That's my problem with F1's penalty situation at the moment. Too many of the penalties are this time penalty that you serve either at the next pit stop or even at the end of the race if there's not another pit stop to come. I don't understand why, if you do something wrong, if you commit an offence that's worthy of a penalty, you should be penalised there and then, because otherwise you get this chance to run your race differently to account for the penalty, and that's not how this should work. And I feel like the penalties we have at the moment, these time penalties, are not a deterrent because they allow people to weigh up if they're worth taking. And how do we end up in a situation with all these kind of incremental time penalties that I don't think have made the situation any better than it was before?
Well, there was once a point where the penalties were draconian, like you jumped the start, you got a 1 minute penalty, something like that. It was really very much quite rare, but you got your race pretty much ruined by it. And then they tried to fine tune it more, and you get these questions of what's the right punishment. It's always focused on the car doing the violations rather than focusing on the effect on the wider race. And I think you've also got the other factor that track limits are such a big issue now in all of motorsport, not just Formula 1, because tracks have changed from being self-policing in terms of track limits, i.e. you have gravel or a wall or just something there that holds you up, to ones where there is space. And I don't think motorsport as a whole has ever really caught up with that. But I think until the focus is over and above what's an appropriate penalty, etc., is what penalty ensures the negative impact you might have on the race through taking that penalty, through committing the offence rather, is addressed. Until you do that, I don't think you get the right solution, because you will get people, as you alluded to, effectively spending penalties. Hang on a minute, this costs us this amount of seconds, but actually it's a net gain, not just for the individual driver, but maybe for the whole team.
There was an example that could have been a case of that. I don't think it was, in the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, where Sergio Perez got a time penalty for an unsafe release during his pit stop in the safety car. Checo said it was his mistake. That's fine. But there is actually a situation there where a team, and this is crazy, I hope nobody will do it, but a team can weigh up. Are we better off firing this car out into the fast lane and hoping that the people behind back up, take a penalty, rather than losing track position? Track position's so important in F1. That's why...
I mean, if it ends up being better for the team, I mean, a P1, they are for it. You ruin someone else's race because you get more points is a good thing. I mean, that's called racing. Right. Didn't FIA do that to Lewis Hamilton 2021 Abu Dhabi? They ruined someone's race to make someone else win. Man, hype.
Why this is such an issue, Because as you say, people would rather have a little bit of time added onto their race rather than the time loss of being sent further back in the queue. What do you think the solution is here? Because for me, I much prefer penalties being too harsh rather than too lenient. Because I look at it as this: if you rob a bank, you don't just get told give the money back at your earliest convenience. Like, you serve a big punishment for that. I think it should be like this in F1 as well, because it's not just about redressing the balance from the offence that took place. You should make people not want to commit the offence in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the case of
race ban, that would, if you've done it 1 or 2 times per season, you can get a race ban whenever.
That's pit stop example, you said
Another
it's a massive safety issue as well, so you want to make sure
that's why I don't think a team would do it, but it's an example of what they could be forced to think about.
Exactly. And the way you police the rules and the way the rules are is the way you force people to play the game. And that's why things such as drive-through penalties, I think, should be used a little bit more. They generally, the drive-through penalty's still there. So's the stop-go penalty.
As soon as you overtake, in my thingy. If you overtake, you maybe don't do it the first lap or the second lap, but if you still, and that also the time penalty, to make it stop, you need to either, or not stop, make it not get bigger, is to let the one you passed by. So that if you have 5, 10, or you don't want 15 seconds now on the time penalty, it will stop, but you will still have it. But if you keep it for 6 laps, you then are forced to go into the pit stop. So you will go into the pit stop, so that will take time, and then you will also have the 30 seconds before you even can change tires or anything. So it will ruin your race so hard.
Where you come into the pit, stop, and then take off again, which is obviously the most extreme one, but they're almost never used because they're, say, for the most serious offences. But I think unless you have something that effectively takes you out of the race and removes your car from a position it shouldn't be in, and does so very, very quickly, you have a problem, because you might be able to wait ages before you serve a penalty. If you've got a 5-second penalty, say at a pit stop, it doesn't happen until your next pit stop. If it's an unsafe release, it might be 20, 30 laps. So you are fundamentally transforming the race. You have bought the rights to change the race, influence cars behind, by taking that.
And P1 is all for it. Ruin someone's race, taking penalties and everything. Yes, as long as you or someone else get points, then it's good.
And that's the fundamental problem.
Du och dina grannar kan få dela på 110 miljoner. Postkodlotteriet.se.
Yeah, you mentioned there kind of
how come the race have a better opinion than the P1?
Ability to impact the race and impact the race of others.
Or, I mean, I think they usually have, so maybe shouldn't be so surprised.
That brings us on neatly to Haas and Kevin Magnussen in Saudi Arabia, where quite cleverly, you could say, Kevin...
That's not cleverly. It's... Wow, cleverly to get penalties, yeah, sure.
And kind of backed up the rest of the field to give teammate Nico Hülkenberg a gap so that he can make a pit stop and stay in the points. Now, Alan Permain from RB called this unsportsmanlike from Haas. I think this problem highlights what we're talking about, what we don't like about time penalties, but was what Haas did unsportsmanlike, or was it genius?
Well,
genius. This fucking stop with that talk. It's fucking retarded.
It was both, and it wasn't unsportsmanlike as well, because the sport is defined by the regulations ultimately and the way they're policed.
Why did Kevin Magnussen get so many penalties then if it was so cleverly done? Jag menar, if he did it without getting any penalties, I would say, okay, that was really cleverly. But he get penalties because he made the reason why he was where he was because of the penalties. Without them, he wouldn't be where he was. So it was not cleverly.
And you should not be able to do something unsportsmanlike. The rules have to prevent that. It's not down to you to decide how you should or shouldn't do it. So ultimately, Magnussen went past Tsunoda, and in doing so, he exceeded track limits very, very clearly. There was no doubt about it. Magnussen knew it when it happened. Everyone watching. I remember watching the onboard with Esteban Ocon, who was behind him, and he was straight on the radio saying, well, he's just bust track limits there. So he was ahead, and it was after he'd made that move that they decided they were going to use Magnussen to back up the group at the back to allow Hulkenberg ultimately to score a point. So Magnussen was able to influence the race of 5 or 6 other drivers by buying that advantage, and it didn't make any difference to his personal race because his race was run anyway. He already had a 10-second penalty even before the track limits one, so 20 seconds of penalties in total, but he was able to help Hulkenberg, and I think that's a great illustration of the problem. And to come back to the question of whether it's sporting or not, that's where the FIA needs to come in and say, do you know what, we want a situation where if a car is in a place that it should not be because of an infringement, we need to get it out of the way as quickly as possible. So for my money, that means if you do it, you drop back as soon as possible. And Magnussen will have known. He could have lifted off and then gone about trying to pass Tsunoda correctly thereafter. If you don't do that, you get a drive-through. And if the drive-through's too harsh, well, you should have dropped.
It wasn't too harsh. Just give off the place. And then you don't get the harsh penalty.
Maybe there'll be the odd case where it's really, really fine margins and not clear cut. You can find a protocol for that. But for 95% of these cases, they know. And you can just say, right, it's down to you to give it back. Because this all comes back to, there used to be a procedure where it was advisory from, it used to be Charlie Whiting would give his opinion on whether they should give a place back just to help them out in terms of the judgment before it maybe went to the stewards. And it wasn't binding, that advisory. But it's just all a carryover of this. And we've had this creeping untidiness in all this growing over the years. And it's just not getting any better.
I think it's another example of letting the competitors, be like the drivers or the teams, have too much say as well, because they're always going to tell you, if you're the FIA making the rules, the penalties are too harsh, you need to have more equalised penalties, and that just makes no sense to me, because if the penalties are too harsh, and I think we both agree that a drive-through is a great idea. MotoGP has the long lap penalty, which is a small, it tends to be 2 or 3 seconds you lose by going sort of off at a corner and going wide. But again, they have to serve it within 2 or 3 laps. You have to, the penalty is immediate, which tackles what you said, Ed, about you've got to, that car can't be where it has got itself illegally for a long duration of time. You mentioned the FIA there, and I think you called it a creep from a kind of era of trying to be a bit more advisory. How much faith do you have in the FIA? I can't believe I'm asking this. In the FIA's ability to get this situation under control and to come up with a proper fix?
They were not.
Not a vast amount, I must admit. I think this has become overcomplicated and there's too much back and forth and debate with the drivers. And I think, to come back to a point I made earlier, the philosophical approach has been all wrong for a long time in terms of what you're trying to do. It's not about taking away the advantage you gain. It should be about preventing you disadvantaging competitors. And I think Mohammed Ben Sulayem's FIA has made a big thing about being the rightful regulator of F1. They're the regulator, the custodian of Grand Prix racing, effectively, and they are. But this is an area where I think they can really, really clamp down on it and take an approach that does preserve that sporting integrity and makes things work really well from a regulatory perspective. Just say, right, do you know what? If you're ahead of someone and you shouldn't be, we're going to give you a big penalty. There's a way for you to avoid it. Just give back the place. You know when it's a problem. And that will just prevent this kind of thing happening. Because like I say, competitors will play according to the rules and the way the rules are policed. So Alan Permane was both right and wrong to say it was unsporting for them to do that. And I wouldn't be surprised if
he was right.
The RB team that Alan Permane's now at would do a similar thing if roles were reversed. Don't blame the player, blame the game ultimately. And it's the FIA.
What? You can't blame the player also. What do you mean? Whenever you what did you say? Complain? Only time you do that is when the player doing the wrong thing. Do you blame the player that didn't do that? No, you don't. You complain, or you blame the one that did the wrong. You blame the game and the person that did the wrong. Man, sort of opinion.
His job to make sure that the game is policed right and works well. And this trouble, as I said, comes back to this track limits issue with the way modern tracks are now. It's never really been got on top of. What a great opportunity now for the FIA to do that, and for F1 to set an example that all racing categories can follow worldwide.
Why though? It was the cleverest move ever that have ever been done in Formula 1. It should be celebrated. Or was it a problem? I mean, you think both, so why fix it when it's both good and bad? Okay, it was half good, half bad opinion by the race. Man. To end up with some maybe fun stuff before we maybe do the more boring stuff. We have Kill Illman, Gulf Air Amazing Business Class. Let's see. Oh,
G'day from on board this Boeing.
We need sound.
787-900. Yeah. I'm heading from Bahrain to Jeddah in what is an amazing business class for a short haul flight. More shortly.
Dropping your rental car back at the airport is quite bizarre here, in so much as we park right out the front of the airport, you lock the car, you go inside, give them back the key and they come and get it. Nowhere in the world are you allowed to do that.
This is Saudi Arabia, right? Or maybe it isn't. Where is it? This is the... I mean, if... Surely there is more airport that do that.
If you're going business class, you don't go to this main area in the Bahrain International Airport. We go to this one up here. This check-in area is really calm and spacious. And now we get our own entry to passport control. Getting through passport control took a minute, security no more than 2, and we've now come up to this lounge, which is glorious. Very spacious, a couple of F1 people in here. I can see a team principal, I can see a driver, I can see a driver's manager, and a few more famous people. I like this lounge a lot. I like the fact that they've got a bar, not that I'm interested in having a drink at the moment, but they do have a good range of spirits and wines. I like the fact that behind me is a golf range and a pool table. There's beautiful views out over the runways, and you can even get a fresh omelette made exactly to your taste, but no ham.
So no. But that's everything but that, so not exactly.
Så nu kommer det norrmän.
Ja. Hej! Vi tänker att spisa lite.
Dagens rätt kanske bara 6.
Stop with the music. It's so hard.
This is lovely.
Now, even though this is a 222 aircraft, these are suites, and they are slightly staggered. The gentleman next to me is probably back 20 centimetres from me, and I have my own entry into this cabin. 2 seats in the middle, though, they're not spaced. So what's this like? What's incredible? Now, there would be no US airline that I can think of that would offer you a cabin like this, totally private, for a short-haul flight. I've flown JetBlue in their Mint class, and that has a throne seat, which is very private. But this is completely different. Now, I didn't expect to get this, and in fact, I'm thrilled. Already we've been offered a choice of beverage. I had this mint lemon drink, which was zesty and sweet. Will there be any
Man, I really don't like mint, so for me that sounds like disgusting.
Whole service on this flight to Jeddah? No way. Anything going into or out of Saudi Arabia is absolutely alcohol free. And another thing that I dare say will happen at some point is that a lot of the locals who are going to Jeddah for the trip to Mecca will get changed at some point into their Mecca clothes. I've seen that on 2 previous occasions. It's something that we don't often see, and they'll do that in the middle of the aisle. They'll take off their tops and put on a typical local robe. Let's talk about this seat. It is fully lie flat. Has a number of controls here on the handset, but I think this aircraft is getting on a bit because these look well worn. On this side there's a control to raise and lower this divider right there. We're provided with Gulf Air's own headphones. This controller controls the in-flight entertainment system, and the screen itself is a good size, and this cabin, along with 1K, which is on the other side of the place, also has a little dicky seat which folds down, allows you to sleep on a fully flat bed. If you go to any of the other seats in the aircraft, they have a much wider foot area. Got a couple of drivers on the other side of the plane shuffling about in seats. Now, this aircraft, by the way, is just shy of 6 years of age. And of course it has the dimming windows just here, which I can make brighter by pressing a button. Then it buggers up my shot, makes it far too bright. But I'll show you anyway. You can do this in fast motion. Okay, it goes brighter than that. If you're wondering what the price of this 2.5-hour one-way flight in business is, it was around about $1,150 US. My son, though, he paid about $180 US for his economy seat, and then we bid for an upgrade for him. Cost us, I think, $110. So his was far cheaper than mine, but if you average it out, it's not bad value, especially for a cabin like this. We paid that sort of money and got a lot less in the past. In terms of storage areas, there's very little. There's a small space down here, but you're not going to get much in there. And the overhead lockers are on each side of the plane. There are no overhead lockers in the middle of the plane, so they become quite hard to get at some point, especially if you're last on. There are 26 of these suites up here in business, and behind there's 256 seats in the main cabin. Paperwork-wise going in, we had to complete a sheet detailing all of our equipment that we take, photographic gear that is. We had to apply for a media visa. Whether or not they'll check our camera kit going in, they did into Bahrain, but there was no great drama, and they never check it on the way out, which I always find is interesting.
Here for some Arabic dates. Here you are. Enjoy.
Just like Qatar Airways and Emirates, we're offered dates and Arabic coffee before we take off. The dates I quite like, and I wouldn't normally eat them. The coffees, you can have that all on your own.
About 30 minutes into the flight, the chicken and mango salad arrived, and it was average. 6 out of 10.
It's not often I get to watch a movie, but I'm doing it now. But these headphones are shocking. They're like clamps on your head. And the other thing, they come with a plug that I've only ever seen on this aircraft. So if you want to plug your own headphones in and listen to the movie comfortably, forget it. It's not going to happen.
Nice.
Just had an announcement over the PA saying those who are starting their pilgrimage, now is the time to change into, and I apologise for not knowing the local name for that outfit, but now's the time to do it. 30 minutes away from Mecca.
Change pickaxe. Gulf Air amazing business class. I have heard nothing amazing. Maybe the window and the room, eller area you have, but everything else sounds bad.
Thank you. Well, that was a great flight. If you get the chance to travel on that aircraft, the 787-900 with those business class seats, you won't be disappointed. That was lovely. Here we go.
Wait, what?
Here's
How?
the who's who of...
The food's on the bed, everything. Man, it sounded like a half good, and you think it was good?
The who's who of F1. Hello. Nice, mate.
Hope you enjoy.
Thank you.
Formula One guest, welcome to Jeddah.
There's no doubt that we receive one of the warmest
Zaladin.
welcomes of any countries that we go to here in Jeddah. They're quite lovely people. Now, find some luggage. Well, the locals like to
Great
get the
General
good spots right
Saladin.
up next to the carousel, so if your bag comes out, I don't even know how you get it. You have to sort of barge through them.
Hey, you made it! Welcome to Jeddah. We're happy to have you.
Well, it was very quick through immigration, but extremely slow for Jason's bag, something in the order of 45 minutes. But anyway, we're out now, and our driver is here to meet us. This is Salim, and these people here are very excited about this event. Hello, Salim.
Hello, how are you? Welcome to Jeddah.
Formula One, we are ready!
Welcome to Saudi Arabia. I tell you what, we are very well looked after here. We have a car to take us to the Media Hotel. Ahead of us is a 20-minute drive to the coast, where we're staying not far from the track, and temperature-wise, a very pleasant 28 degrees Celsius. And that's where this video ends. Thanks for watching. Stay passionate.
No, I think that's me making that noise with the seat. What is that?
Oh shit, skip that. Okay, that was, I mean, something. It didn't sound like it was a good, but apparently it was. Good for him then. Let's see. The only thing that is left to watch. Let's see. Wasn't the race? Wait. Am I tripping? Wait, what? Oh, okay, now I see. Yeah, sure, we do it. See, but when was this made? 11th March, so it must be in. Oh yeah, holy shit. Okay, here, let's see. 1 hour, okay, sure. More from the race. Would Perez actually benefit if Verstappen quit the race? Yes! Oh my god, yes! Why wouldn't he? Oh my god, washed. Totally bad tight.
The Athletic.
And stuff with this. I mean, this intro I really like, but what is the first stuff? And the race is on.
The race is on, and while it was another race win for Max Verstappen and another weekend when Red Bull was in the headlines for the
race is on. Is that like a that the podcast is on, or
the wrong reasons? The big story was unexpected F1 debutant Ollie Behrman's 7th place for Ferrari. I'm Ed Straw, and joining us to tell you all about it are Mark Hughes, Scott Mitchell-Malm and Samarth Kanal. Well, Mark, we'll come to you first. 4th Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, not perhaps the most thrilling race in terms of dissecting the performance, etc., but always an interesting track, this one, isn't it?
Yeah, and in fact, the contrast between what a thrilling track it is when you look at the high speeds and how close the walls are and how flat out it is, a real hardcore track. The contrast between that and the sort of uneventful nature of the race was quite striking.
Yeah, a bit of a shame really, but there were still lots of storylines, which is good. And Scott Mitchell-Malm, how have you been enjoying this one?
Yeah, certainly not the most.
Let's see the good stuff. Oliver Behrman, he's 100% good. Lewis is being still washed. That's 100% good. What more? Mercedes still being bad. I would say that a win. What more? No, I don't know anything more good.
Exciting race from Jeddah that we've had that's produced a mix of genuinely good races and chaotic races in its short history. And I don't think this race was either good or chaotic. But one of the things I do like about it is that it is very challenging, and when there is something at stake, it means that the tension runs pretty much to the end, because there's just always the chance of something going awry. And while everything was set,
there was no tension this race. It was a lot of copium that something could happen.
At the front in the podium places, there was a little bit of jeopardy throughout, and it meant that Behrman hanging on to that 7th place as he was chased down futilely by Lando Norris and Lewis Hamilton just had a bit of edge about it until the end, because he could have had a 3-4 time bigger gap than what he had, but the prospect of getting it slightly wrong, as Lance Stroll did very badly early on, and Fernando Alonso even gave one of the inside walls a little kiss on those really tight blind entries, that was there until the end. And so that is something that this race that has, even when it's a bit quiet.
Nope.
Yeah, that's very, very true. It's a magnificent driving challenge. And Samarth Kanal, how have you found the weekend? I know you've been my cameraman mainly on the way to the circuit for our in-car insights videos, as we like to call them.
Yeah, well, also thank you for driving so safely along the mean streets of Jeddah. Yeah, just to follow on from what Scott said, yeah, the tension is really what kind of ramps up this race. Magnussen's was interesting. He was pretty all over the place in terms of penalties, and then he held up a train of cars and secured Haas a point. And even in a midfield battle, you can see how kind of exciting things get on a street circuit.
Yeah, exactly. So there are lots of positives as always, and lots of storylines for us to delve into. So let's get into it. Scott.
För våren på TV4
Play som är
fullspäckad med.
It's pretty unusual for us to focus on the driver finishing 7th, but in this case it's justified, isn't it? Because it's not every day a driver makes their F1 debut. Rarer still, they do it for Ferrari at the age of 18, and vanishingly rare that they do so well. You followed Behrman's weekend closely after he was flung in at the deep end in place of Carlos Sainz, who was at the track on Saturday and recovering from his surgery after being struck with appendicitis. So how impressive was Ollie Behrman?
Very impressive, and I say that as someone who had high expectations for him in terms of how he would deal with this situation. I'm not alone in rating Behrman very highly, but long before this weekend I followed, for example, his Mexico FP1 outing for Haas. Every single lap of that, I did the same in Abu Dhabi as well. The F1 adjacent work that he has done, whether that's in Formula 2 or Formula 3 or whatever, I've always watched his categories. I know what a great driver, what a great young driver he looks like and how much potential he's got. And having seen some of the traits that he's exhibited in the junior categories and also in his practice outings and testing, I know how highly rated he is from a mental point of view. His capacity to deal with things is extremely high, and he has a fantastic approach in that he's wonderfully attacking and confident and proactive about the way he goes about things, but he judges that line superbly well in terms of he doesn't overshoot from the very start, but he's very, very happy to go to the limit quite quickly. So I thought that stood him in good stead. Okay. When you layer that all together, I had high hopes. But high hopes means not looking out of depth, not crashing, not embarrassing himself. It doesn't mean coming agonisingly close to a Q3 spot, which actually he probably should have got if he'd hooked up everything in Q2 the way he could have done. He could have been in the top 10 shootout. And it's certainly not finishing 7th.
But that's mostly thanks to Hamilton being so bad
in the race, because frankly, that result is basically acceptable if you're a full-time Ferrari driver. In Leclerc's hands, it was clearly the second fastest car this weekend, but that lead group is pretty tight. With Aston Martin more competitive this weekend, Mercedes and McLaren about there as well. Perfectly conceivable that either Ferrari driver could end up 6th or 7th on a given race weekend with how that lead fight is. So Behrman's basically, in the space of 2 days, a disjointed practice session and qualifying, and then his Grand Prix debut, got to about where a Ferrari driver could be if they were a full-time driver. And I think that says an awful lot about the way he performed and performed above expectations.
Yeah, the thing I really like is I always say these are cometh-the-hour opportunities, aren't they? Thrown at the deep end, you can change the course of your career by nailing it, and that's absolutely what he did. Just hugely impressive. And the thing that really stood out actually was something not anything he did, but the amount of positivity and effort his rivals made to grab him and say well done after the race, after qualifying as well. And you saw various fairly significant paddock figures doing that as well after the race. So yeah, just a huge impression, not just to the outside world, but to the decision makers too, and to his fellow F1 drivers.
Yeah, they treated him like a peer. They didn't treat him like someone who was getting a one-off chance, or, you know, this was a lovely little bonus for him and a little extra thing for him to tick off. This was a bunch of drivers recognising someone with a huge amount of ability and potential, and then also recognising the job they actually did. There was nothing patronising about the way they talked about Behrman. It was full-on praise and recognition of a job well done in tough circumstances. I would say, just very quickly getting into some specifics about the race performance, because I did follow everything through practice, qualifying and the Grand Prix, followed it all on board. And inevitably there were rougher moments. I was almost said rough, but rougher, in that he had slightly questionable car positioning at times on the first lap or two, where someone with more experience isn't making himself quite so vulnerable. I feel like there were one or two opportunities to be slightly sharper in battle, not just early on, but for example after the restart behind Zhou Guanyu, and then Nico Hülkenberg lost a few laps there, damaging his tyres, costing himself race time, the sort of things that can add up by a race distance. But these are really micro details, and even within that there are counterpoints. His move on Yuki Tsunoda at the restart is one of the best overtakes I've seen at this track.
It's funny that I asked him after the race about that one, because I mentioned there are a few key overtakes, and I mentioned the Tsunoda one with the dummy, and his face lit up. He had a big smile on his face. He really enjoyed that one and enjoyed talking about it too.
It was fantastic, because it's not just a late dive under brakes. He was on the wrong side of the track, and it wasn't quite a dummy, because I don't think he was necessarily setting up Tsunoda to open up the corner as such, but it was reactive, it was instinctive in the moment. He recognised that there would be an opportunity under braking. Tsunoda had committed to that line by that point, and he basically had to almost lift out of it to get back behind Tsunoda to be able to move left, to then dive down the inside. To do all of that, and to do all that at the restart as well, where you're not really sure where the tyres and the brakes are going to be, that was exquisite judgment.
Or really a lot of luck that he succeeded with.
It was that perfect blend of aggression and ability, and without overstepping the mark. So that was absolutely fantastic. But I was so impressed through the race by, once he'd potentially done a bit of damage at the start of the stint in behind Zhou and then behind Hülkenberg in particular, he just seemed to get the tyres under control for a while. The pace was, I thought initially, I was a bit worried he was quite a long way off Leclerc, and that if that was his pace for the rest of the stint, it would be a bit uncompetitive. But I think he was actually just in management mode, because he was just getting things under control at the start of that stint, because there was a turning point. He suddenly lowered his lap time by several tenths of a second, and from that moment onwards was on that pace or improving that pace right to the very end. So not only was he able to keep things clean and get things done and have a couple of nice eye-catching moments, his pace step and the way he was able to hold that pace to the end of the Grand Prix, relative to Leclerc as well, not just the guys who were around him in that position, in sort of 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, it was exactly where that car should have been. And I think to have got to that phase himself...
Well, should have been. it should been 4.
But it wasn't being coached dramatically by Ferrari or anything like that. I think that spoke volumes for the way that he was able to apply himself and then also cash in on the opportunities in the race itself.
Absolutely, and hugely impressive, because after that early race safety car, his target really was P7. We were talking about this live, weren't we, Scott? And I was sort of saying, yeah, well, 7th is there, and he delivered what he needed to take 7th. He was only a few seconds behind George Russell, kept Norris at arm's length after Norris and Hamilton made their stops to take softs late on. So that was really good. Now, inevitably, we've got loads of questions about Bearman from the Race Members Club, so we'll tackle those now by way of a sneak preview of the final part of the podcast. So, Mark, Lucky Cohen says, after Ollie Bearman's F1 debut with Ferrari, how likely is it that he will get a full-time race seat in 2025?
Hopefully really likely, because, man, Kevin Magnussen isn't good enough to be still in Formula 1.
And what else does he have to do to get
in-house.
that? And on a similar note, Nick Wolf asks how his mega performance impacts his prospects for a seat.
Oh, I think it's very difficult to envisage him not being in a full-time seat next year. Obviously, you would think it would probably be Haas. That's probably where Ferrari is going to place him. So I think he would really need to mess up his Formula 2 season to not be in Formula 1, just on what he's done this weekend. And what was particularly impressive, just to add to what you've all been saying, I think that result wasn't flattered by circumstances. It was actually, if he'd just not made that slight mistake in Q2 and gone slightly too deep into turn 22 and done that lap when the tyres were new, he would have got through to Q3 and probably would have qualified about 6th or 7th. And from there, I think he's looking at something like a 4th or 5th place finish, given where the car was at and given where he was at. So I think actually 7th undersold how competitive he actually was. We could have actually been looking at something even more head-turning with roughly the same amount of merit. So yeah, I think everyone will have seen that. Everyone up and down the paddock will have seen that, and I think he will be heavily in demand. But obviously he's a Ferrari driver, so his career will be dictated by them to an extent.
And Samarth, the next question from Mark Martin: what made Ferrari pick Bearman over Robert?
Oh yeah, the same people at the head for Ferrari, man.
Schwartzman.
Well, as you know, Ferrari kind of run a WEC program with their LMH cars, and Robert Schwartzman's busy with that. And he could have come here, except Fred Vasseur said that it was stupid to bring more than one reserve driver to a race. He said that there was no point doing it. With drivers running the WEC program, he said that it would basically take more time out of their schedules to bring them to different countries in between WEC races. So Ollie Bearman was basically the reserve that they'd chosen to be here this weekend. Every F2 race Ollie Bearman will be at, he'll be the reserve driver for Ferrari. And they didn't hesitate calling him up, and he did a great job in that regard. Funnily enough, Vasseur also mentioned that Sainz was absolutely destroyed, and I quote that, destroyed, after doing his FP1 and FP2 sessions. So they started to think something was really wrong there, and then they didn't hesitate calling up Ollie Bearman to just come up. So yeah, that was it. It was a really obvious choice for them.
Yeah, and of course you could say the same applies to Antonio Giovinazzi, also in WEC and in the Ferrari fold. A question now for Mark Andrews, who says, in the last 2 seasons we've seen both Liam Lawson and Bearman thrown into the deep end. Who had the tougher job and who did the better job? Well, I would argue both had an incredibly tough job. I do think Bearman had a tougher job. He had a more competitive car than Lawson did, but he's an 18-year-old. He's being thrown in to make his debut as a Ferrari driver at a very tough track. Now, Zandvoort's a tough track as well, but Saudi Arabia, Jeddah, Corniche Circuit is a very tricky one as well. So I think that they both had difficult jobs. I would put Bearman a bit ahead, but it's not like Lawson had it easy. He had a really tough job. And it's what I always like to see with drivers like this when they get thrown in at the deep end and they seize the opportunity. Lawson did it. Bearman did it today. We've seen drivers in the past do it. For example,
Nick de Vries did it.
Kamui Kobayashi springs to mind when he had his sub-outings for Toyota at the end of 2009. He was not going anywhere near F1 before that. And then suddenly he was a full-time driver.
Come on, mention Nick de Vries. He did it. I mean, it fooled Oh no, what's his name? The Red Bull guy. Oh my god. Yeah.
After drivers just take those opportunities if they've got a bit about them. And a connected question mark from Christopher Parrott. Where does Bearman's performance rank in the pantheon of F1 debuts?
Oh, I think it's right up there. It's you know, the really.
My God, how come I don't remember his name? The least I know is from Austria. Maybe I was friend with Jochen Rindt. But yeah.
Sensational ones. You think back to Mario Andretti putting it on pole in '68 on his debut. Ricardo Rodriguez at 19 putting it on the front row at Monza for Ferrari. Gilles Villeneuve in an obsolete McLaren at Silverstone in '77. But these are all, you know, what very, very high caliber drivers do. And then when you look back in hindsight, you say, well, of course they did that. That's how good they are. And I think we'll be looking back in time at Bearman saying the same thing.
And Scott, a question from Via Nikari, who says, how soon will Bearman replace Magnussen?
I think it would be very unfortunate and probably unfair on Magnussen if it came this season. But that will depend on Magnussen's performances. I'm sure we'll get onto this later on, was mostly impressed by what Magnussen did this weekend, especially in the race.
Go fuck yourself, they were not impressive. Yeah. What Fiat did in 2021 Abu Dhabi, that was also impressive. Man, they just said, Max, you will win now.
Based on the role that he played for Haas. But we know that Magnussen ultimately has a limit as a Grand Prix driver. And Ayo Komatsu, the new Haas team principal, is acutely aware of that limit because in his previous role as the leader of the engineering group at Haas Trackside, he's very in tune with Kevin's limitations as a driver and sort of, even if he pieces everything together, what his maximum is. He's also massively a fan of Bearman. He was really impressed by what he did in the FP1 outings last year. So my suspicion is Ferrari will want Bearman to have a Ferrari F1 drive as soon as possible. And Haas has a team principal that will want to have Bearman in the car as soon as possible. If Magnussen gives them a reason to replace him this year, I can see them taking that opportunity. If not, it'll be for 2025.
And the final question I'll take from Dave Langford, who says, when was the last time a Grand Prix driver made his debut for Ferrari in F1? Well, very simple answer. 1972 British Grand Prix Arturo Mazzario, who finished 6th. Like a stat like that, that's always good fun. Now, before we move on, a quick reminder about a survey our friends at The Athletic are running. We're very grateful you listened to us, but now we want to hear from you. We're asking you to fill out a quick survey about you and your podcast habits by going to theathletic.com/survey24. 3 lucky entries will win £100 or dollars worth of Amazon vouchers as well. So whether you're a long-time listener or a new one, we want your feedback. Go to theathletic.com/survey24. That's theathletic.com/survey24. The link is also in our episode description.
No! Go away, Ad! Wait, what's it called? Cadillac Blue? Cadillac! You mean a dishwasher name? Formula 1 don't want this bad stuff in Formula 1. When they have Steak, Formula Team Kick Sauber, and then we also have Visa Cash App RB Formula 1 team. So much better for Formula 1. But yeah.
Vad är den lägsta räntan jag?
I don't know.
Right, Mark, it's time now for your favourite question. Can you explain how the race was won, please?
Fastest driver and fastest car set pole won the start. That's what happened. It was the interest in this race wasn't really centered around that. That was a given, and it was more to do with why did why was there such a lack of variation in the race? And there were several reasons for that, and that distinguished this race from previous Grand Prix at Jeddah. The Pirelli hard compound had very, very low deg, and the early safety car, which brought almost everybody in on the same lap, meant everybody was on the same tyre of the same age. And also there was quite a clear step change in the actual performance orders of the cars in the front of the field this weekend. The Red Bull was fastest, obviously. The next step down being the Ferrari, which was significantly faster than the McLaren, which had a clear edge on the Aston Martin, which was faster than the Mercedes, and so they were all in their natural performance order, and that was really it.
Yeah, sometimes it's the way, isn't it? Would you like to just try and quantify the gap, Ferrari to Red Bull? Obviously still trying to get a feel for that this season. Ferrari's still the closest challenger, but not quite in the same postcode.
Yeah, it was in just time terms, it was about half what it had been in Bahrain, but you'd sort of expect that because one of the Red Bull's big advantages of the last 3 years is that it's how it balances the tyre deg between the front and rear axles, and because Jeddah's not a circuit that places particular strain and doesn't induce very high tyre deg, that difference is much smaller. So the Red Bull's advantage is reduced, but it's still there, of course, but it's reduced. So although it was only half as far away as it had been in Bahrain, I don't think that means anything significant.
I'm actually, I know it's very early days to say this, starting to get a little bit of a Verstappen 2020 vibe from the way Leclerc and Ferrari have started this season. I feel like the kind of order behind them is changing a lot more than the order for who's the best team and who's the second best team is going to change early on. And Leclerc is just operating at such a high level. He started this season as well as he ended last season, and I saw something, I can't remember what it is, but is it like seven or eight races in a row now he's qualified on the front row? Just basically ever since that car got more to his liking in the back part of last year. So he's excelling in qualifying, but he's also doing a great job in the race. And if it continues like this, because just a word on Sergio Perez, I think he's done a good job. You consider how difficult last season got for him at points. He really does seem to have been revitalised by the new season and the new car, and is doing exactly what Red Bull needs him to do, which means when the car's that good, both Red Bulls will be 1 and 2. They might not be that in qualifying, because that's not where Perez shines and it is where Leclerc shines, but that is what the natural order should be in every race. Red Bull 1 and 2. Then it's a case of who finishes third. But at the moment, like, this is where the Verstappen 2020 comparison comes in. It just feels like that's going to be Leclerc now, because that car does look like it's got the edge on the others. And I say Leclerc's at this fantastic level.
Wait,
and I just feel like
is the Mercedes up there? Have they still made a bad car?
Be the bridesmaid to the Red Bulls for quite a few races this season.
Yeah, both a good achievement for him and incredibly frustrating, doubtless. Now, of course, Scott, the difference between Red Bull's on-track serenity and the choppy waters off-track, stark this weekend. What did we learn in this saga that we've been talking about endlessly for the past month during the Jeddah weekend?
Yeah, it's really difficult to pick out new lessons in this sometimes, because it just feels like it's been this one giant mess for about, 4 or 5 weeks now? But the big thing for me this weekend was the way it escalated for Verstappen in the context of the story around Helmut Marko, that Marko fueled himself after qualifying, indicating that he could potentially be suspended. He didn't know, but there was a bit of a suggestion that there wasn't really any basis for him to be suspended, but he just wasn't ruling it out, which seems to relate to Red Bull, maybe Horner, maybe Red Bull GmbH, taking an interest in different things that seem to have been leaked at different points over the last few weeks. I'm not talking explicitly about the dossier of alleged evidence that was sent out to all those people in Bahrain, but there's been all sorts of chatter, and Marko may or may not have been involved in that. And Red Bull, the suggestion is that Red Bull just wanted to establish that, so they've been probing a little bit. And that went down really badly with Verstappen, who, and I don't mean this to say...
Oh shit, Oh, they're talking about the off-track saga. Okay, but I looked up something. I think I've learned that same day IndyCar will have their race. Will also Formula 1 have. So double race stuff. Okay,
5 weeks now. But the big thing for me this weekend was the way it escalated for Verstappen in the
the thanks for just Verstappen, nothing else.
Context of the story around Helmut Marko, that Marko fueled himself after qualifying.
Helmut Marko. He was wrong about Nick de Vries. Nah, Mick Schumacher could have this.
Indicating that he could potentially be suspended. He didn't know, but there was a bit of a suggestion that there wasn't really any basis for him to be suspended, but he just wasn't ruling it out. Which seems to relate to Red Bull, maybe Horner, maybe Red Bull GmbH, taking an interest in different things that seem to have been leaked at different points over the last few weeks. I'm not talking explicitly about the dossier of alleged evidence that was sent out to all those people in Bahrain, but there's been all sorts of chatter, and Marko may or may not have been involved in that. Red Bull
by the media or the Red Bull.
The suggestion is that Red Bull just wanted to establish that, so they've been probing a little bit, and that went down really badly with Verstappen, who, and I don't mean this to say that he's been two-faced, but he showed his colours and his real allegiances for the first time in all this, because he's been very neutral. Everything that's been kicking off, Max has pretty much stayed out of it, and when he has been drawn into it, he's said very little. He's offered qualified support to Horner at times. He sort of defended his dad when Jos went off on his rant after Bahrain, but he didn't really say that he completely agreed with it, and also didn't say he didn't. He's been very careful with what he said. But when this Marko stuff came out, Max was flat out, absolutely adamant. And the first time I've ever heard Verstappen link his situation, his future, to anybody else or anything else. But he basically said, if Marko goes, then I might go as well. Said that whatever Marko does impacts his decision making for his own future, which was massive. That's
okay. And it could just be the biggest bluff ever to make so Helmut Marko can keep his place, right? I mean, if Helmut Marko actually leaves, would Max actually 100% leave? Or could it just be a 50-50 gamble?
Such a big thing for Verstappen to have come out and done. And then 24 hours later, you have Horner not really ruling it out. And I think hinting that he might actually want to call Verstappen's bluff over this and just be like, all right, well, you want to leave over this guy? You really want to walk away from the fastest car in F1? All these wins and more titles? If you want to do that, I've got a dozen other drivers that want that seat, and I bet a bunch of them could win races as well. I feel like that's where Horner's position is.
I mean, Sergio Perez is already there, so
sort of meandering towards, and I don't.
Oh my god, that would be so beautiful. Sergio Perez, world champion.
I don't know if it's a power play because of.
Hopefully, they make also a good enough car so he also would succeed with it.
All the other nonsense. I don't know if it's how he genuinely feels, and this is the opportunity, the first opportunity he has had to actually assert that position. But it's that development, to me, is the most significant element in terms of the way the Red Bull stuff is playing out and all of that internal politics.
Yeah, and it just continues to be an absolutely astonishing situation. And you've got to say, Mark, this isn't the end of it, is it? Something's going to happen. We keep saying something will happen next, and then something happens. Normally...
Okay, the fine stuff happening. The media is doing everything out of the world for just Verstappen. It brings stuff up every time, so surely stuff will always come up. But from the Red Bull, will stuff come from that now?
Even quicker than we expect.
Yeah, that's certainly been what's happened so far. a sort of uneasy peace seems to have broken out at the end of this weekend after Mintzlaff has had his meetings with both Horner and Marco, and tentatively confirmed that there will be no changes, and it seems as though
so nothing happened, and the media are talking like something will happen.
Peace may have broken out, but the underlying tensions in the power play are still going to be there. There's no reason why they won't be there, and it's just how that is going to manifest itself next. How and when, and so yeah, stay tuned.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about this plenty in the future, no matter how much we'd rather.
Yeah. You would rather talk about something else than do it.
There was a different topic because this is taking up so much time, but yeah, it's an unresolved situation.
It takes so much time. Stop talking about it then. Nobody forced you. Nobody forced you to waste, 5 minutes on this take, and still you did it.
Still, uneasy peace, I think the phrase that was used, and I completely agree with that.
We do have a quite lengthy video going out on this, so while we've
you don't want to talk about it than you do in videos.
Kind of covered the main points in a bit of a quickfire fashion there. If anyone does want to learn a bit more about it and go into it in a bit more detail, that video will be going up on our YouTube channel at some point overnight, I think, after this race. So by the time you listen to this, it might be live, it might not, who knows, but go there if you want to have a bit more of a deep dive into it.
Exactly. We didn't want to take over the post-race podcast completely with this, despite the fact it's tried to overrun the F1 season. Now, McLaren took four.
En underbart god chokladsmak och krispighet. Nu som flingor.
Fourth with Oscar Piastri, although Norris was down in 8th after being on the wrong side of the strategic split under the early safety car. Again, McLaren was brisk, but not quite quick enough to be at the front of the chasing pack. So why is that, Samarth?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I mean, it's definitely high. It's definitely top speed rather, not high speed, where McLaren seems to suffer. So that's a big limitation, and we did see it a little bit in the Piastri-Hamilton battle. What we also saw, though, is, Piastri really enjoyed Sector 1. He had the run of it at some points, and that's where kind of McLaren have an advantage. So it's those short, sharp, kind of winding corners that they're really quite fast. And there's some directional changes there, which kind of bodes well for their car balance. However, their limitations also seem to be in corners that are quite long. So if there's a long turn-in point, they seem to just struggle to keep the car turned in at the same level of grip as, for example, Ferrari or Red Bull. That's really where they see their limitations. Mark, do you agree with that? Do you see anything else there with McLaren's limitations?
Just the slow corners, and so that corner onto the straight was it's unfortunate for them, because not only were they down on top speed, but they were slow onto the straight as well. And I think with DRS, his advantage over Hamilton was 6 kph, something like that, which wasn't really enough. So yeah, it's that combination. It's just not very aero efficient.
I would say I will mind when this pickaxe is done. Then I will do some other gaming, because
it's
that's
top end.
needed.
It's super fast through fast corners, and there was one particular corner in that sequence, that turn 6 to 10 sequence, where a Piastri in qualifying was 5 kilometers up, even on Verstappen. So, if all the corners were like that, it would be on pole and leaving the Red Bull behind, but of course they're not. So yeah, it's just a little bit unbalanced in where its performance is and the type of corners that its performance is. So yeah, it's a trait that's been there for the last couple of years, and it's clearly still there in this one.
Yeah, and there's a hope that can be tackled partially during the first third of the season. That's the timeline Andrea Stella, the team principal, put on it. But he did say it was kind of a year-long project to tackle the weaknesses and make the McLaren more of an all-rounder, and that they have to go through all of that because it's essential to do so in order to ensure they're where they need to be in 2026. So yeah, there's some work to do for McLaren. The car's good, but yeah, it's certainly not going to be beating Red Bull on merit any time soon.
But will it beat Mercedes? That I would say is the biggest win ever.
Scott, can you quickly explain to listeners who might be wondering why Lando Norris wasn't done for a jump start? Because he certainly moved before the lights.
Yeah, so basically there's a bit of tolerance that's allowed. The way that a jump start is judged is by the transponder that's fitted to the car, and essentially if the transponder judges a certain amount of movement, then that is what constitutes starting, effectively. And that's not what happened. So while there was a small amount of movement from the car, not enough to trigger the transponder effectively, and therefore, as the rules are framed, not a jump start.
I love how Russell snitched straight away on the radio and just said, "Jump start, Norris." You know, just
it fits your. I think you're not alone in this, Mark. But it fits the often characterization of the head boy.
Yeah.
Kind of properly, doesn't it? It's just like, sir, he's broken the rules.
He was probably composing a PowerPoint presentation to go with it as well. But yeah, Lando Norris basically admitted that it was sort of his mistake because it was a pure instinctive reaction. He said so. It's like he almost thought the start was there and it wasn't, and then I think he was quite pleased that he managed to get it stopped so he could then do a legal start within the bounds that you mentioned there, Scott. But yeah, a frustrating race for Norris. He obviously was on the wrong side of that strategic split, but he did say, well, it was worth a go. Sometimes I feel we're not aggressive enough. This time it didn't work, so he wasn't particularly furious about it. And obviously going on to those softs later on, there wasn't enough of a pace offset to close down Ollie Behrman and try and do better than 8th, but he did manage to beat Lewis Hamilton. Now, let's talk about Mercedes in detail, Scott. Had a tough weekend. George Russell was 6th behind the excellent Fernando Alonso. Lewis Hamilton was 9th, having stayed out under the safety car. Did the Mercedes struggles this weekend raise any doubts for you?
Yes, yeah, definitely. After Bahrain, you could say, well, first race weekend, they've done the test as well, but first race weekend with the new car, this is meant to set a baseline. So as long as the car's responding well and doing everything it's meant to do and that they want it to do, if it's now just a case of layering on performance, then fair enough. That's kind of what you'd expect to be, right? Mercedes' first proper go at these regulations, effectively, after redoing the concept.
Oh my god, they're so washed. Yeah, after 2 years they can finally start doing something.
It was never going to be on Red Bull's level when this is the third evolution of a brilliant starting point for Red Bull back in 2022. But I feel like this weekend kind of indicated that there are some worryingly familiar limitations. So it's not just about, they just need to add performance. You know, the ride quality doesn't look so good. They're triggering some bouncing. The car doesn't look that convincing at high speed. And Hamilton, I wonder, because I wasn't following him on board, given that we had at least 2 radio messages broadcast where Hamilton commented on how good the McLaren was at high speed, I can only imagine how many times he mentioned it over the course of the race, because I suspect there might have been a bit of a deliberate play there of like, I'm going to get this message across. Not necessarily to the outside world, but just want to make sure that the team really understand that this car is killing me in the high-speed stuff. And it just feels like a bit of the same old. And obviously I think you've got a bit of a better understanding of it, Ed, based on who you've spoken to. But it doesn't fill me with confidence that they have actually understood these regs as well as they were suggesting they had and that we were expecting them to have by now.
Yeah, exactly. I asked Toto Wolff after.
Yeah, the copian about Mercedes. You think they will succeed, but they will not. So why keep coping? We take that one.
The race about, well, I stated that the comments that drivers were making about not being able to get in the sweet spot, the bouncing problems, difficulty running close to the ground and stiff, have worrying echoes of the past 2 seasons. And basically Wolff said, yeah, it's been 2.5 years that we're chasing this fundamental. He didn't quite finish his point, but obviously it's a fundamental problem and they are still missing something. And that's a real concern because they seem to think that they were reasonably well on top of things and they had a car that they could just evolve nicely now. They've not got that though. That's the concern. They have made big improvements into this year, but there's still, I think, mysteries of this rule set and how you make the most of a ground effect car, getting it to run low, generating the downforce that you expect while not hitting other problems, and getting it to realise the consistent downforce that the simulation tools tell them they get. It's just not all coming together.
Yeah, at very low ride height that you get at very high speeds, it's not working. And looking at the GPS traces, and I've looked through them, it was the slowest car through turns 6 to 10. It was 4 kilometers slower than the Alpine, for example, through that sequence. 11 clicks slower than the Red Bull and the Ferrari. So it's by far the slowest in that.
What do you mean click?
Yeah, it's a huge problem, and I'd be really concerned if I was there, because it's something they've been looking at for a very long time, and they've just not got to the bottom of it. Now, it is difficult, and obviously when you get to these very, very low ride heights, when the floor's very close to the ground, it does get enormously complicated. It's difficult to simulate, but they're at a knowledge deficit there. They don't know exactly what the answer is here, and I think it's going to be another season where they will hit in certain track configurations these difficult weekends. I don't think it'll be as bad as last year, and certainly not the year before, but there will be some difficulties, and I think they have to just make sure that they understand.
I mean, the car will maybe be better, but they will be worse than McLaren and sometimes Aston Martin. So in that light, the car could seem even worse.
And accept the position they're in and really tackle it. They say they're not going to be complacent, and I genuinely think they're not being, but you just wonder if they've again underestimated how much needs to be done to master that problem. Progress made, but not enough. Shall we talk about...
Jag ska aldrig sluta festa, sa du. Vi säger, vi finns här när du känner dig mogen att börja pensionsspara. Välkommen till Länsförsäkringar Pension.
Kampen för låga priser fortsätter. NetOnNet.
Haas now, Mark, because they managed to nick a point. Considering the expectations were so aggressively managed in the build-up to the season, it was pretty remarkable. It was Nico Hülkenberg who took the 10th place, but how crucial was Kevin Magnussen to this result?
It was everything, so stop acting like he's...
Oh, totally crucial, of course. He took a couple of 10-second penalties for driving indiscretions, but he then used the fact, or Haas then used the fact that his race was ruined to for him to act as blocker for all the cars behind which Hülkenberg would have dropped, because he was out of sequence. He hadn't stopped. He'd done the Norris-Hamilton strategy. So he would have dropped right into the middle of that pack of the Alpines and Albon and Sargent and Ricciardo. He would have been in the middle of that pack, so his race would have been, just a scrappy one out of the points. But Magnussen, through foul means or fair, bunched them all up for long enough that there was that nice little gap for Hülkenberg to drop into, and as soon as it was there, in he came, and it was a brilliant team strategy.
Man, people have a really sad thinking about this is brilliant. Wow, so fucking opinion.
Or they pounced upon an opportunity.
And I think there's probably one other driver you would depend on to do what Magnussen did. That's Fernando Alonso.
Okay. I was going to suggest Esteban Ocon.
Oh, well, Ocon could do it. Yeah, maybe Ocon as well. He's an obstinate character in battle as well. He's done some great defensive drives. There was a point where Magnussen and Ocon were together, and I thought, this one could end it. But it is. But it reminded.
I think you should. I think you should tell them exactly what it was that you said. Because you messaged me.
Did I both say? I think I may suggest they both end up in the sea. There was the slightly flippant phrase I used. But the reason Alonso leapt to mind was because of, and this involves Ocon as well, that Hungarian Grand Prix drive a few years ago where Alonso just kept Hamilton at bay for 10 laps, and that allowed Ocon to win the race. And Magnussen's very, very good at this. He is a very hard racer, and we shouldn't underestimate, it wasn't just driving round several seconds slow. He was doing that, but he was also very, very aggressive. And Ao Komatsu after the race was delighted with it, and because there was the point where it looked like Tsunoda had got him, but Magnussen managed to get back ahead and make it all work. So I think it was really good. It was not a great weekend certainly not a great race for Magnussen in general, but he elevated it by playing this amazing cameo role. And he didn't just buy Hülkenberg a few seconds, he bought him a whole heap of time, the vast majority of a pit stop window, which was remarkable. I think it's worth noting as well, it was good for Haas to have a strong day, because actually the qualifying day went pretty badly for them. The car was brisk. There was kind of a puncher's chance of nicking a Q3 place. They wouldn't in normal circumstances, but if Magnussen was pretty quick this weekend as well. If Hülkenberg and Magnussen had been able to hook it up and others underachieved a bit, they might have just slipped through. But they both had problems. Magnussen was a timing disaster. They realised he did an outlap and a prep lap.
Oh my God,
for the tyres. Halfway around the prep lap, they suddenly had a massive panic. About, no push, you're not going to make it. And he didn't make it. And Hulkenberg was basically sent out without enough fuel for Q2, and that was as a result of some kind of problem with the fueling. It wasn't they forgot, they thought they had, and there just wasn't the fuel in there. So it was good for Haas. And I think with everything that's been going on there,
I hate this.
They should be delighted with having a point, because we've got this split. There's a clear top 5 teams. And the joke is that the other 5 teams are just there trying to beat Lance Stroll. That's what plenty of people in the paddock have been saying. But Lance Stroll, of course, was out of the race. So, there was a point on offer there. And well done to Nico Hülkenberg. Well done to Kevin Magnussen and Haas.
Fucking worst opinion about fucking Haas.
Right, it's the final part of our Grand Prix review podcast. That means it's time for questions from the Race Members Club. Thanks to everyone who supports us. We massively appreciate it. Remember, you can now subscribe to the race on Apple.
I mean, he plays one card. I don't read it, and then he wins because of that.
Podcasts worth £3.99 per month or £34.99 a year. You can enjoy ad-free listening. Race Members Club bonus episodes and early access to bring back V10's episodes, plus the convenience of having all your favourite podcasts from the race in one channel. Also, there's the option to join the Race Members Club via our website, where you get all of the extra podcasts, plus other things like an ad-free web environment, member discounts, and the opportunity to ask questions on this podcast for £2.99 a month. Sign up via the link in the description for this episode. As always, loads of questions. We'll pile through what we can, but I can only apologise we won't have time for all of them. Mark, question from Hugo Pring. Will Red Bull already be beginning to move focus to next year? Like most F1 fans, possibly.
They can afford to, but I think there's plenty of development and pressing on to do with this year's car yet. I don't think they'll be satisfied with just half a second a lap advantage in the race. They'll be pressing on the assumption that the others might find half a second, even if they won't. So yes, they'll certainly be looking towards 25, but even more than that, they'll be looking towards 26. And yeah, they'll certainly have resources devoted to that at the moment. But once you've got a nice, comfortable advantage, it does give you that luxury of being able to afford to devote a bit more time to the future.
Yeah, very much a virtuous circle when you're competitive, isn't it, in terms of future development. Samarth, J.A. Vanderval says, to what extent do you think Alonso is happy with Aston Martin right now? The performance of the Aston, of course, is less than a year ago, and Alonso is, in my opinion, handing out small needle drops. How do you see it, and what would be his possible exit strategy?
Yeah, I think his unhappiness, if that's a word, which it isn't, is growing bit by bit. I mean, he let out little hints that he is looking elsewhere now, and especially that Hamilton's move to Ferrari next year might have opened up a little door for Alonso, something to explore there. And now I can't say for sure if he'll move to Mercedes, but what I can say is that he is looking elsewhere. And with races where the Aston Martin isn't quite keeping up to the pace of other teams, Alonso does seem afterwards to imply that it has had an effect on his mindset when it comes to contract discussions. There's also the fact that Aston Martin isn't perhaps punching where it should be punching in the Constructors' Championship. With Stroll crashing out of his own accord today, it seems like there's one car that's competing for Aston Martin, which is a bit of a shame. And that's something that Alonso will be looking at as well. Mike Crack also acknowledged today after the race that Fernando is looking elsewhere, and Aston Martin should try and keep him. It might be a bit of a task for them. He He jokingly turned down the offer of Verstappen and Hamilton, but that was definitely a joke. I stress that's a joke. I think the way Alonso put it was, I don't want to keep Aston Martin waiting. That was quite a polite way to put it. Where do I see his options? That's a tough one. I think he's definitely going to be trying to get the Mercedes seat. He has a lot to offer, I think. Ed, where do you think his options lie?
Oh, Fernando Alonso will be looking at everything. He'll be looking at Red Bull as well, thinking there's just a sliver of a chance of Max Verstappen doing something unexpected, shall we say. But yeah, I think Mercedes will be the one he's looking at most covetously, because that's the one that's there. And as Mark, you explained on an episode, I think, our Aston Martin launch podcast, Fernando explained at length how he would be willing to give 100% for any team, on and off track, do everything you want. He knows the clock is very low on time, and he's still not given up the chance of one last shot at a world championship. So Fernando Alonso will be looking at absolutely all opportunities. And I guess the really interesting dynamic there is how long Aston Martin will wait. I think they'll wait a fair while, but they'll want to try and pile the pressure on there. Scott, a question from Zybit Tyler Biggs, who says, reflecting on the 100% takeover by Audi of the Sauber team, are Valtteri Bottas and Zhou Guanyu doing enough to justify continuing to hold the seats during the course of the year, or will Audi look to bring in new blood mid-season? My view is that Bottas is struggling to demonstrate he is not a spent force, but will see out all of 2024. But Zhou hasn't been able to show consistent performance to warrant a works drive, and Theo Pourchaire should get a chance. And James Mellier asked a similar question.
Oh, is that his name? Yeah. Yeah, true, Pourchaire.
About the impact of the Audi takeover on the driver market.
I think we're going to need to take a trip somewhere, Ed.
Should we take a trip? Yeah, let's take a trip for one moment. We'll be back in a second.
Welcome to Valtteri Bottas Sympathy Corner.
Right, here we are, Scott, for the second time this season in everybody's favourite corner.
Yes, and I feel bad because obviously we're not explicitly talking about misfortune in the race or anything like that, but a little bit of broader Valtteri Bottas sympathy in that the Sauber move, I'm sure he's been well recompensed for it. I think the deal that he did when he left Mercedes was a good one for him. I think financially and personally it's probably been quite rewarding. Competitively it hasn't worked out, and if there was going to be that silver lining of, well, this is going to morph into the Audi Works team, so hang on there, and then you're back part of a works team project again. I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced he'll be like the first name on the get list for Audi. So I don't think Bottas is doing a bad job. I don't think he's phoning it in or anything like that. And I think he was better last year than sometimes it looked. But I just think a Carlos Sainz or even a Nico Hülkenberg, who is someone that Andreas Seidel, the Sauber CEO and now the Audi F1 team CEO, rates very highly and is very keen on, I think those will be ahead in the pecking order. And I think objectively, I like Zhou. I think he has had good moments in F1, probably slightly better moments than some people expected he would be capable of. But I don't see him on the grid beyond this season. I think there'd have to be some circumstances that freed up a seat that, for whatever reason, his combination of factors made him a really good candidate for elsewhere. I don't see why, as Audi's gearing up for 26, I don't see why you'd keep Zhou. I mean, you might keep Bottas if you could only get.
You keep Bottas, but not Jürgen Zhou. Yeah, what's the opinion?
One of your other targets, but you're not keeping Zhou.
Yeah, to add to the sympathy for Bottas, he was a bit unfortunate this weekend because he was balked on his final Q1 lap. He thought he could have been in Q2.
Badly.
He had to properly lift where he should have been flat out to avoid a crash, so nothing he could do about that. And then in the race, when he put on the hards, just couldn't get any tyre temperature into them. It was just slow. So yeah, a tough one for him. And yeah, Zhou had the FP3 crash, and then he had a pit stop disaster, which I'm not sure showed up so well, but that's 2 pit stop disasters Sauber have had this year. On both occasions, it's down to problems with cross-threading the wheel nuts and then have to change the wheel nut because they damage it in doing that. They want a quick fix for that because that's a big problem, and they've upgraded some of their pit equipment this year, but yeah, that's a real object of focus for them. A question now from Matthew Clegg, which I'll take, who says, if Max Verstappen was to leave Red Bull, would that be a help or a hindrance to Sergio Perez? Might it increase the importance for Red Bull to run 2 equally competitive cars in a post-Verstappen world, especially looking to 2026 and beyond? I think generally Perez would see it as quite helpful if Verstappen left, because Verstappen's an all-time great and Perez just isn't at his level. No disgrace in that. It's just very difficult. So then you've got all the other questions about, well, who would take Verstappen's place, etc. Presumably somebody quite good. But for example, if Verstappen suddenly in the next week said, oh no, I'm done with Red Bull, I'm taking time out of Formula One, then Perez is in with a chance of fighting for the World Championship, and he'd be the favourite, wouldn't he? Because he's been second in the first 2 races. So I don't think that'll be a big problem. I would say Red Bull do run 2 equally competitive cars. What they don't have is 2 equally competitive drivers, and that's simply because if you've got Max Verstappen in one car, it is extremely difficult to find his equal. That's just the difficulty. So, yeah, I think Perez would be perfectly content if Max Verstappen were to leave him Red Bull to himself. Mark, a question from Ben Hawkes. Why were the soft tyre runners not able to make more of an impression on the cars in front at the end of the race? This was Norris and Hamilton, of course.
Yeah, the softs were good for about 2 or 3 laps, and then they fell off quite rapidly. So, yeah, they were just a little bit too soft for the track on the day. And the hard and the medium were you could actually, in theory, have run the entire distance without a stop. Definitely on the hard and probably on the medium as well. That was the consensus after the race among the teams. And yeah, the soft just wasn't very good.
Next up, a question from Danny Elliott for you, Samarth. Yuki Tsunoda comfortably outperformed Ricciardo in qualifying and beat him again in the race. With Perez doing what Red Bull requires of him, is it too early to suggest Ricciardo's time as a top team is over? It does seem Tsunoda has the better of him, just like the few comparable races from last year.
Yeah, I think it might be a bit too early to suggest that. Partly because I think the driver market might explode or implode depending on how you see it. But I do think that Ricciardo definitely is struggling compared to Tsunoda, and he's admitted that himself. He's pretty open about it when he is struggling. Today there was also a slow pit stop that really didn't help him. But yeah, I mean, Ricciardo just seemed to admit that he really didn't have the run of the car today. He really struggled today, and things like that will compound when he's looking for a seat at a top team, wherever that may be. Let's not forget, though, that he has experience, he's won races, and he definitely has the pace. It's just sometimes, as we see, some drivers just don't click with the car. It is it's not a considerably different package, but it is an evolved package from last year, and Ricciardo has plenty of time to get to grips with it. I think that time's going to run out pretty quickly, though. That's what I think.
Next question from Eric Shutton to you, Scott. What is your opinion on driver choices? Does Ollie Behrman's successful debut show that some teams are too conservative in their driver choices? The contrast between Behrman and, for example, Bottas was big in this race. Don't use this as an excuse to go back to Valtteri Bottas Sympathy Corner. Only use that jingle once an episode.
I will. I'm going to deploy that with discretion because I don't want it to get old. I don't think it will ever get old, that jingle, but I need to be careful. With driver choices, I think I struggle. I'm wary of trying to put big generic statements when it comes to driver choices, because I do think it's team specific, circumstance specific, and driver specific. With the Behrman, for example, I don't think it's not an injustice that he's not on the grid already this season. Now, what he's proven this weekend is clearly that he is capable of being a very, very good F1 driver. And if you put him in F1 now, actually, he would do a good job. And if a team had wanted to take a punt on him as a rookie for this year, I suspect he would have performed admirably, and this weekend is evidence of that. But it's not like when, for example, Piastri won F2 so convincingly as a rookie and then couldn't get a seat for the following year. That's ridiculous. And that had a more egregious example of someone else getting a seat because, and I said this earlier, Joe, I think, has done quite well in F1 at times, but he got an F1 seat, having been comprehensively beaten by Piastri in F2 when Joe was not a rookie and Piastri was. So that was a lot more frustrating because it's needlessly cautious. And there are some reasons for it in terms of, like I say, team circumstances. How long do you want to drive for? Do you want to take one on loan? Blah, blah, blah. But that's the kind of thing that sucks. When it's someone like Behrman, less so, because you think, okay, well, actually F2 is probably the right place for him to be this year. Now we just know that he's ready for an F1 drive as soon as one becomes available, which is brilliant. So I'm kind of torn, to be honest. I like it when teams are brave, and I massively commend Ferrari for going down this route with Behrman, because Samantha was explaining earlier why it made sense for him to be the option this weekend, but they didn't need to do that. They could have had it so that when he's in F2, he's focused on F2, and that they have someone else who they trust within their pool of drivers to be around. They could do that without breaking a sweat, but they don't, because they back Behrman to be the option on the off chance they need him. So and I think that shows a continuation of a change for Ferrari.
Yep.
Leclerc started it when they picked him in his second year to replace Kimi Raikkonen, but this doesn't happen 10 years ago at Ferrari. They don't have an 18-year-old reserve driver for starters, let alone actually put him in the car.
I put Luca Badoer in. Well, that's more like 15 years ago now. My time certainly flies. It only feels like yesterday. Mark, a question from Juan Jose Aguirre, who says, how did Hamilton manage to keep Piastri at arm's reach on used tyres?
He was quicker at the end of the straight, so we touched on this before, and the McLaren was slow onto the straights and slow at the end of the straight. So Lewis was driving very, very defensively and very well, and it was just
Did he do that very well?
2 points on the track
sure.
that gave him the crucial advantage at the natural overtaking spot. And he just stuck to his task.
Next up, a question for you, Samarth, from Annie Kramer, who says, has had a solid day out in Jeddah with some good teamwork along the way. Are they climbing the ranks, or is this a full storm?
That's a tough question. I mean, I'm going to kind of weasel out of this and just say it's neither. In a way, it's not a false storm because Haas are improving and they're learning from the upgrades they brought recently, and the tyre issues they seem to have last year do show signs of kind of diminishing. At the same time, climbing the ranks is a bit strong given the midfield is so tight. It's little things like today where you have Magnussen backing up the pack and creating a train of cars that really help, and they can really shape the contest. Scott, what do you think about this?
Well, I was going to just chime in quickly and be a little bit more optimistic with Haas, because I think what Haas is doing at the moment is maximising everything that it has at its disposal. Not in every given session. Ed was explaining earlier very well how it botched qualifying on not one but both of its cars, which isn't great. But in terms of the way that they've approached this season, the work that they've done in the off season to get the race one package wherever it could be, understand that package as well as possible in testing, start on the front foot, and then not just do that in Bahrain but continue that in Saudi. That tactic does not work 100 times out of 100 in the 2023 Haas, but it did today because of the progress that they've made. At the same time as them hitting
progress, thanks to Magnussen, they got even 1 point, and that was not progress, that was deep progress. Magnussen being worse.
Pretty much their maximum. A couple of other teams dropping the ball. Sauber is nowhere near where that team should be in terms of its performance. Williams is starting the season on the back foot because it had a horrible winter that made its car late, and there are some things that aren't on the car that should be on the car. Everything's a bit rushed, and so it's just not very refined. That's two teams immediately that are giving Haas an opportunity. Alpine, how many times have we said this already this year? Absolutely nowhere near where a works team should be, not even close to where they were last year. That's the third team that's opened the door. All of a sudden, that's both cars in Q2 for Haas every weekend possibly, and once you're in Q2 you're sniping at points, especially when you've got a car that can actually do a race distance. So I actually think,
become a traitor?
Contrary to their expectations and ours, we'll hold our hands up to this, so we got it wrong, but to be fair, Haas got it wrong as well. They started the season as competitively as they could possibly have hoped, and other teams have dropped the ball. So they have moved up the ranks versus where they were at the end of last season.
I think where we have to be careful that it is treated as a full storm is that I don't think this casts aside the long-term concerns about that team and the fact it's not being invested in enough, and the fact that over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, huge challenge for 26 as well, that it's going to slide backwards. But it does show that it's an effective racing team that can do a decent job and be competitive in the short term.
Also, it doesn't answer the question of can it finally develop a car, because it never has. And this could easily be that repeat false dawn of past years where it scores some points early on and then fades to nothing.
Yeah, very much so. A question from
one.
Jack Aitken now, who says, the Racing Bulls don't seem to be as fast as many of us thought coming into the season. Where does this team fit into the 2024 pecking order so far, Scott?
I actually think it is about where we thought it would be. I think it's a marginal Q2, Q3 car, and it could score points behind, the biggest teams if it hooked everything up. But it just isn't hooking everything up. It's missing opportunities, and I feel like it might end up being a little bit like last year. Ed, was it? How many races last year at the start of the season did Tsunoda end up finishing 11th? It was a bunch of races in a row, wasn't it?
Yeah, he was a serial P11 finisher early on.
He was the new Esteban Gutierrez, wasn't he?
Yeah, always thereabouts, but not quite in the points.
Yeah, and it feels like that's where it is this year. You mentioned earlier in talking about when Haas sniped and got that solitary point. There are 5 teams that are clearly quicker than everybody else. We had the suspicion that RB was at the back of that group at best. Probably thought they'd be slightly better than the rest of the midfield, which hasn't been the case. But that can come down to just execution and driver performance when it's this tightly matched. So I actually think it's more or less there in the midfield. It's clearly better than a few of the other teams around them. But it's just going to get gazumped by 1 or 2 other teams on any given weekend if it doesn't maximise everything, and that's what could cause it to miss out on points finishes. But I think everything maximised, Tsunoda probably should have been the one that scored that point today.
Yes. Fuck Haas. They should just leave the sport.
And the final question I'll take from Hamish McDonald. In 2021, there was a lot of discussion after the missile attacks by the Houthis. However, nothing mentioned by F1 this year. Is this still a talking point between the journalists? Were you provided with special travel advice? And in addition, does anyone else have a deja vu moment with appendicitis super sub Ollie Behrman? Well, yeah, obviously Nick de Vries last year when Alex Albon had appendicitis came in.
2022. Time once again making a fool of you, Ed.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely right. Yeah, time's passing far too quickly. Yeah, Monza 22, which of course got De Vries his full-time race seat for last year that turned out not to be as full-time as he hoped. So, similar circumstances. Well, thankfully, Carlos Sainz didn't have any of the complications that Alex Albon did, and Carlos was in the paddock today. He looked like someone who just had an operation, but he was up and about and fully engaged in what was going on in the race, cheering on Ollie Behrman and also Charles Leclerc. But I think Behrman's F1 future will be a longer and brighter one than Nick de Vries is ultimately proved to be. But yeah, on the other point, it is still a talking point. There's no specific reason for it to have flared up. And obviously there's always discussions around Saudi Arabia and sporting events, etc. Snooker was getting the brunt of it this particular week with their new tournament going on. There was no special travel advice. There's general. So I'm obviously coming from the UK. There's a UK Foreign Office instructions and that kind of thing, but nothing in particular. But there are things going on. The Red Sea is quite active. There is plenty going on with the Houthis as well still. So it's still there bubbling on in the background, but it didn't flare up as a big talking point this weekend, thankfully. And I'm sure there will be points in the future where they're talking points again. Well, thanks very much to Scott, Samarth and Mark for your insight, and do head to therace.com, plenty to read there. Mark's race analysis. Scott's been working on all sorts, including his look at the Red Bull situation, and my driver rankings will be there at some point on Sunday. And we, of course, have got now a 2-week gap to the Australian Grand Prix, but we're going to keep podcasting throughout, so stay with us for everything you need to know from the world of Formula One.
Okay, that was that. I don't think it's anything more that could be watched. So let's finish this game and next game that will maybe happen. Let's see if I can win this. I mean, I should win this. Man, so long time ago I had these cards. The starting cards. Yay, bronze 7. I feel like I am at this ranks all the time. Oh shit. Because I never try to... I mean, I play what the quests say. If it say play 3 games, I play 3 games. Not more, not less. Or sometimes more. But nevertheless, need to finish the quest. Yeah, but I have nothing else to watch, and I will probably end soon, so I can like end now. Let's see if more Formula 1 stuff will continue. And but there will be a this week and next week break, I think. No, this week and then next week will it be, but it's, you can say 2 weeks.